بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد عليه أفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم. طبعا زي ما احنا متعودين معاكم برحب بكل جميع أطباء الأطفال على مستوى مصر وعلى مستوى الدول العربية والشرق الأوسط بالكامل. وزي ما عودناكم إن احنا بنطلع معاكم لايف في كل الويبينارات في شهر يونيو، يوم الاثنين ويوم الأربع ويوم الجمعة. النهارده هو بداية بيرز اللي بنسميها بيرز، ودي استكمال للويفز اللي عملناها في النيوتريشن قبل كده. Let me speak in English. Welcome to everybody to Egyptian Academy Pediatric webinar. Today is a special day for all pediatricians in Egypt and the Middle East region. A day everyone waiting for it. It is the beginning of another integrated series of nutrition for pediatrics to complement the previous series. Today is the first wave of 3 waves of nutrition pillars called brain development. I am honored to represent 2 pillars of pediatrics. First one is one of the founder of pediatric clinical nutrition in the world and one of its great pioneers. And the other one is an able professor who had a talent of delivering and communicating the information professionally and smoothly. Now, let me to introduce both of them to you. The first one is my dear Professor Ahmed Lucas. He's founded the Child Nutrition Research Center at the Institute of Child Health in London, where he is a now Emeritus Professor of Pediatric Nutrition. He also holds an Emeritus Chair at Oxford University and has an academic appointment at Cambridge University. Professor Lucas' work on nutrition span period from fetal life to adolescence. He initiated first intervention trial to test the programming effect of early nutrition on long-term health and development. He has an over 400 publication in the field of nutrition, has received numerous awards for his work, including American Academy of Pediatrics 2018 and James Spence Medal. Dr. Lucas, how are you?
Very good, thank you.
Welcome to Egypt. We are all happy to meet you. Yes. The second one is my dear friend, Professor Ahmed Badr, Professor of Pediatric, Cairo University. He is one of the eminent speakers all over Egypt and Middle East area. Dr. Ahmed, welcome, Professor Ahmed Badr.
Welcome, Wael, dear friend, and thank you for the introduction. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Lucas, how are you? Fine?
Very good, thank you.
Fine. Dr. Ahmed, we will begin first with Professor Ahmed Lucas. He will present his lecture and we will welcome to you again. Thank you, Dr. Ahmed. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you. So Lucas talk about nutrition and the brain. Yes, Professor Lucas? Professor Lucas, you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Now the floor for you. Please. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for attending my webinar. I'm very sad that I can't be physically in Egypt, which is such a beautiful country, but I'm afraid we've all now entered a new world of virtual reality. But despite the great distance between us, I hope we'll be brought together by the science. Now, I'm going to talk today about early nutrition and long-term neurocognitive outcome. The idea that nutrition could have long-term effects is part of a broader concept that I've termed programming. The idea that a stimulus or insult at a critical period would have long-term effects on the organism. We know of many agents in early life that can program us, but I'm going to focus on nutrition and growth, which have been shown in animal studies to program multiple long-term effects on the brain, but also metabolism, morbidity, cancer, and lifespan. Now, many years ago, in the early 1980s, we decided to test whether nutritional programming occurred in humans. And we did 29 randomized trials from that point, showing that early nutrition has important later effects on the brain and cognition, but also on many other systems such as bones, lungs, atopy, and the heart. But my focus today will be on neurocognitive development. Now, there's a further underlying concept here, and that is one of neuroplasticity, the capacity of the brain to be modified by environment, for instance, nutrition. And we know now that the brain remains plastic throughout the whole of our lives, from infancy to old age, although I'm going to focus today on infancy. And I want to explore with you two key areas that would help underpin our practice: undernutrition and breastfeeding. So let's start with undernutrition and the brain. We've had decades of observations in humans that show that malnourished infants have lower IQ, but causation was never proven. This could have all been due to poor environment, poverty, or lack of stimulation. And our randomized trials were initiated to attempt to prove whether nutrition can program the brain. And we started work in the 1980s, initially on around 1,000 premature babies. Now, in neonatology, the link between early nutrition and later development is dominated by observational studies. A recent review by Ong showed 19 observational studies on early weight gain, 16 on early head circumference gain, and these nutritional parameters were highly linked to later development. But observational data are very prone to confounding. And so we needed randomized trials. And actually, there are very few of these. And our neonatal trials were virtually the only ones with long-term neurocognitive outcomes. We now have 30-year follow-up on the brain and cognition. So I want to take you initially into an adventure into the evidence from our preterm nutrition trials, because these are important pieces of evidence that have broad relevance to the feeding of all babies and to neuroscience. Now, we started with 4 randomized trials: donor breast milk, which was unfortified in those days, versus preterm formula as sole darts or as supplements to mother's milk, and then a standard term formula versus a preterm formula as sole darts or nutrition mother's milk supplements. Now, these trials can be looked at individually, or they can be combined, still preserving randomization. And I want to start off by talking about our trial comparing a standard term formula with a preterm formula as sole darts. Now, this trial is not complicated by the use of human milk. We're simply looking at 2 levels of nutrition. And the term formula, we now know, provides suboptimal nutrition for preterm infants. Well, we found that head circumference gain was 28% lower with the more suboptimal diet, the term formula, compared to the preterm formula. That is a major difference in the growth of the brain. Well, we then measured IQ at 7 to 8 years follow-up. And you can see that those who are fed suboptimally had a significant reduction, particularly in males, of overall IQ, accounted for by this massive 13-point reduction in verbal IQ. Now, our subsequent mechanistic analyses have shown that it's protein intake rather than calorie intake that has the major effect on later verbal IQ. We also found that those who were fed suboptimally on a term infant formula had a major subsequent increase in motor or mental impairment, including an increased risk of cerebral palsy. Now, how could early diet affect the risk of cerebral palsy? Well, studies on the remodeling of the primate brain provides a possible mechanism. And our theory is that if you have a perinatal brain insult, which is common in premature babies, and you're fed optimally, then you have a chance of repairing and remodeling the brain. But if, on the other hand, you have poor nutrition, you may go on to develop cerebral palsy. So the conclusion here is that just 4 weeks intervention on average, with just 20% lower protein intake, caused a major lasting decrease in IQ and an increase in frank impairment. Now, do these cognitive effects persist into adolescence or early adulthood? Well, at this point, it's important for us to combine all 4 of our clinical trials. Here we have suboptimal diets, unfortified donor breast milk, and a standard term formula being randomly compared with enriched diets, including a preterm formula. We followed those babies who were born less than 30 weeks gestation. And you can see that at 8 years of age, preterm born males and females had a huge 6.7 point lower verbal IQ if they'd been fed suboptimally on average during the first month. And this persisted into adolescence. So now you can see a similar 6.9 point lower verbal IQ in those who are fed suboptimally in the first month. And we're now looking at many years later. Also, we found at our adolescent follow-up that verbal comprehension index was 7.4 points lower in the suboptimally fed group. This is half a standard deviation loss of cognitive potential in those who were fed suboptimally just in the first weeks. Now, verbal comprehension index is the ability to express oneself and to apply reasoning to information presented verbally. And it's perceived as brightness, which, amongst other things, is an important employment attribute. Now, undernutrition also affects later outcomes not included in routine IQ tests. For instance, those who are fed on a suboptimal diet in the neonatal period had worse educational attainment in adult life with inferior reading and arithmetic scores. Planning ability is an important everyday skill, and we found using the Cantab test of planning ability that those fed on a suboptimal diet in the neonatal period had 15% lower planning ability scores as they got into adult life. We've also been recently looking at motor skills. We devised a motor score at 7.5 to 8 years of age based on balancing skills, ball skills, and hand skills. And we find that neonatal weight gain drives the motor score 7 to 8 years later, and particularly influenced by hand skills, manipulation skills. So what is the neural basis for these long-term developmental effects on early nutrition? Well, in animals, it's practical to study the effect of nutrition on brain structure, and we can do detailed analysis of the brain at a cellular level. But how do we test the effects of undernutrition on the brain structure in humans in real life? Well, MRI is our most detailed tool, but inspection of individual scans is far too crude. What we do is statistical comparison of groups of scans, for instance, groups fed different diets. Now, amongst the several techniques that we use using MRI, one of the popular ones is volumetrics, where we can use 3D data sets to do automated calculations of the total volume of the brain, of gray and white matter, of cortical thickness, and of subcortical structures. Now, using such MRI techniques, our data suggests that the cognitive effects of early nutrition relate to multiple effects on the underlying structure of the brain. And I want to give you one example because it had historic interest. There is increasing evidence in the literature that the size of this large structure, the caudate nucleus, is highly related to IQ. And we found that the volume of the left and right caudate nucleus in adolescence was specifically 10% lower in those previously fed suboptimally in the first weeks of life. Now, this was the first experimental study that showed in humans that early nutrition could permanently affect the structure of the brain. We also considered that some single nutrients might be important here. Our preterm formula had taurine added to it, and there was none in the standard term formula. And based on what we know about taurine, we considered this a potential contributory candidate for an impact of undernutrition on the brain. And we found that low neonatal taurine intake with low plasma levels was related to reduced mathematical skills at 7 and 18 years follow-up. And at 18 years, our MRI studies showed that the low taurine group had less gray matter in these very specific parts of the parietal region of the brain, which are parts of the brain that are affected in adults who have problems with mathematical ability. So the conclusion here is that randomized trial evidence shows that undernutrition adversely programs cognition and structural development of the brain. Now, what further evidence could help us define the critical window for an impact of undernutrition on the brain? I want to consider for a moment studies on the impact of fetal growth on cognition. Now, observational studies show that fetal growth rate or birth weight is highly related to subsequent IQ. And that would imply that if you grew poorly as a fetus, you would be more at risk of lower IQ at birth. But these data are confounded by numerous factors relating to lower birth weight. We needed to do a randomized trial, but that's very difficult for the fetus. So we decided to study monozygous twins, which share genes, parental IQ, gender, and gestation. And we looked at the impact of reduced birth weight on IQ in the smaller, malnourished twin compared to the larger one as a control. What we found was a highly significant linear relationship between the birth weight difference between each twin pair and their IQ difference. So just to put some numbers on this, for twins who differed at birth in more than 750 grams, verbal IQ was 8 points lower in the smaller rather than the larger twin at follow-up. And for twins differing in birth weight by 1,500 grams, verbal IQ was an entire standard deviation, 15 points lower in the smaller twin. We estimated that a 1 kilogram loss of intrauterine growth potential would triple low IQ scores under 70, with major implications, for instance, for educational attainment. Now, there is a large global incidence of intrauterine growth retardation, and this is actually an unquantified problem for cognitive potential and for educational resources. Now, can that cognitive deficit in those growth retarded at birth be rescued by postnatal nutritional intervention? Well, we did a trial in small, that is small for gestational age, but otherwise healthy full-term infants who were randomly assigned to a standard versus an enriched formula with 30% more protein to promote growth and development. And using the Bailey scales, we found no benefit of enhanced postnatal nutrition. Now, there's more work to be done in this field, but our data so far suggests that theoretically, the window of opportunity to intervene is actually before term. So in summary, the period prior to full term is a very sensitive one for nutritional programming of the brain, whether you're a fetus or a premature baby. Now, can we further define the critical window for brain programming by undernutrition? Well, randomized trials in full-term infants would allow us to test the evidence for a post-term window of nutritional sensitivity. Now, there have been 4 randomized trials in the world literature of nutrient supplementation in frankly undernourished populations. And these trials show lesser, but still important, cognitive effects in malnourished term infants, lesser effects than those seen in preterm infants, suggesting that the period post-term is an important one, but a somewhat less sensitive one than with the premature baby. So we can plot the sensitivity of the brain to undernutrition. The greatest period of sensitivity is prior to full term, but the window still remains open, at least for the first 2 years of life. And these data have major implications for practice because this is the sensitive window where our nutritional interventions can impact on long-term cognitive development. Now, just a little epilogue to my piece on malnutrition or undernutrition. We can't really consider the brain without also considering the heart. Now, we have a paradox in nutritional science because we see favorable programming effects from faster growth on the brain, but we have extensive data now that show that slower growth has a favorable effect on long-term cardiovascular risk. So how do we balance these risks in infant nutrition? Well, if we look at the periods of maximum sensitivity for programming in normal infants, it is largely before birth that the brain is particularly sensitive, and it's largely after birth that the brain is particularly sensitive to cardiovascular programming. So prior to full term, given the sensitivity of the brain, we favor fast growth like the fetus, but compromising somewhat in the full-term infant, cardiovascular programming favors somewhat slower growth, more like the breastfed baby. Well, the message so far is that undernutrition with poor growth impairs neurodevelopment in the fetus, preterm infant, and full-term infant. Now, there are many nutritional factors that influence brain development in term and preterm infants. And given 3/4 of an hour to talk to you, I can only cover 1 or 2 things of major importance. And perhaps the most important nutritional factor to influence the brain is breastfeeding. And I'm going to talk about that now. Now, numerous studies and reviews since 1929 show that breastfeeding is associated with better cognition. But mothers who breastfeed tend to be more highly educated and exhibit more positive health behaviors, which could highly confound the cognitive outcomes. So how can we actually establish causation? Well, occasional randomized trials are feasible in term and preterm infants. Just consider the preterm infant. Now, there's a large amount of observational data in these babies. For instance, after adjustment, observational data show that human milk-fed preterm infants have higher developmental quotient or IQ, and we previously found that those fed on their own mother's milk have an 8-point increase in their IQ. But, as I've noted, observational data are prone to confounding. So I want to look at what we have in the way of experimental data here. And I want to start off with this randomized trial here, comparing donor breast milk, unfortified donor breast milk, with a modern preterm infant formula. Now, these 2 diet groups provide very different levels of nutrition. Bank breast milk that's unfortified provides poor nutrition, The protein intake was only 1.8 grams per kilo per day, but we had there the value of human milk. Preterm formula, on the other hand, provided good nutrition, a protein intake of 3.6 grams per kilo per day with much faster growth. Of course, these studies were conducted many years ago when we didn't know about what was an optimal level of nutrition. But interestingly, when we look at IQ at 7.5 to 8 years of age, the bank breast milk and the preterm formula group had very similar IQ. And this suggests that the evidence that the benefits of human milk in part compensate for its nutritional deficits. So the equal IQ here represents probably a deficit from a nutritional point of view, which is compensated because this is a human milk-based diet. Now, when we measured IQ, we also measured specifically the arithmetic subscale. This is often reported separately because of its educational importance. And you can see here in this randomized comparison of preterm formula versus donor milk, the donor milk group, despite the poor nutrition, had 27% higher arithmetic score than the preterm formula. So that in this particular instance, having human milk actually outweighed the nutritional disadvantage. Though, of course, both having good growth and having human milk gives us our best outcome. And then another randomized trial comparison I wanted you to look at is that donor breast milk and preterm formula represent quite an extreme difference. A better comparison will be donor breast milk versus term formula, where these two diets are more designed for the full-term infant. And that is a legitimate comparison because we have an internal control of the same preterm formula in both trials. And you can see that when we do this cross comparison, the bank breast milk fed group had a 7-point advantage in Bailey psychomotor development over the group fed on a standard term formula, despite the fact that there was still a lower protein content in bank breast milk than the term formula. So these studies show that the cognitive benefits for human milk are at least as great as meeting nutritional needs with formula of higher protein content. So I emphasize again that we really want to achieve both, that is, have human milk and also meet nutritional needs. Now, in full-term infants, there is only one major randomized trial of breastfeeding and the brain. This is the PROBIT study from Belarus, a cluster randomized trial of a breastfeeding promotion intervention. Now, the intervention was to take breastfeeding mothers and randomly assign them to allowing them to breastfeed in their own way or to actively encourage them to breastfeed as much as they could. There were 17,000 breastfeeding mother-infant pairs here, and the PROBIT trial intervention worked in that the intervened group, where mothers were actively encouraged to breastfeed, was 43% exclusive breastfeeding at 3 months, compared to only 6% in the control group. And when the PROBIT intervention group was looked at 6.5 years follow-up, there was a 7.5-point advantage that they had in verbal IQ. So randomized trial evidence supports the observational data that breast milk feeding benefits cognition in preterm and term infants. Now, these cognitive effects of human milk have focused attention on the structure of the brain itself. We've been doing MRI studies of the brain in 16-year-olds born preterm, and the percentage of mother's milk in the diet is independently related to white matter volume and to verbal IQ. The more mother's milk, the greater the white matter content. And this accords with sophisticated studies of Dayoni, showing that term-born subjects' white matter volume is positively related to IQ and to breastfeeding. Now, myelin underlies connectivity in the brain, and it's key to long-term cognitive function. So we hypothesize that breast milk permanently benefits cognition, at least in part, by promoting white matter and myelin formation. So what could further support that hypothesis? Well, breast milk fats are very promising, and I want to have a look at those with you. Let me just remind you of the biology here. The epithelial cells of the breast produce milk fat globules, and as they're secreted into the milk, they get covered in maternal apical cell membrane, and that is called the milk fat globule membrane. And this membrane, which is maternally derived, is rich in phospholipids and cholesterol, and it encases a triglyceride core of the rest of the fat in breast milk. And if we look at this milk fat globule membrane in more detail, it's a phospholipid trilayer, and these blue things are protein molecules which are studied in the membrane, and we now realize have a wide variety of biological effects. So breast milk fat is not just a nutritional ingredient, it's present in breast milk in a complex biological form with a number of nutritional and other roles. So what about fats in cow's milk-based formulas? Well, many years ago, the cow's milk-based fat, all those fat globules, were thrown away and replaced with a blend of vegetable oils in order to attempt to mimic breast milk fatty acids. Now, vegetable oil blends in modern formula lack the biological sophistication of milk fat globules. So one question is, could the absence of milk fat globule membrane explain advantages of breast milk feeding versus formula feeding because of all those phospholipids in the membrane? Well, to test that hypothesis that milk fat globule membrane could benefit formula-fed infants, a randomized trial was required. And this was led by Domalov in Sweden. They took 160 full-term formula-fed babies and assigned them to formula with and without bovine milk fat globule membrane. So they put back into cow's milk what had been removed in the formation of formulas many years ago. And they did tests of cognition using the Bailey scales at 1 year of age. And you can see that those fed on a formula with milk fat globule membranes actually had half a standard deviation higher Bailey score at 1 year of age compared to a control formula. And these milk fat globule membrane fed babies were much closer in their cognitive score to the breastfed baby. Now, milk fat globule membrane has specific lipids in it that we believe are important for the brain, like cholesterol, sphingomyelin, phospholipids, gangliosides, and choline. And numerous studies in animals and emerging data in humans show these lipids have a key role in myelin formation and in cognitive motor function and learning. Well, I want to consider just two of these special lipids from the milk fat globule membrane, just as an example. Let's take cholesterol. Well, there is increasing evidence that cholesterol can drive neural development, and breast milk is rich in cholesterol. Now, in animals, dietary cholesterol, if it's increases the brain myelinization rate of weaning mice. And even if you just increase the dietary cholesterol in the mother, you influence the myelinization rate of her suckling pups. Now, in our trial, which I've been showing you, of banked breast milk versus preterm formula, mean plasma cholesterol during NICU stay was higher in the human milk group. And in this same randomized trial, we found that mean plasma cholesterol was strongly related to neonatal head growth. And of course, early head growth predicts later neurodevelopment. So this provides rather exciting evidence that cholesterol in the diet of the breastfed baby could help drive neurodevelopment. Let's look at sphingomyelin. Now, 25 to 35% of the polar lipids in breast milk are sphingomyelin, and metabolites of sphingomyelin are a key component of myelin itself. So is there any evidence that dietary sphingomyelin improves neurodevelopment? Well, in developing rats, dietary sphingomyelin increases axon and nerve fiber diameter and myelin thickness. And Tanaka has done a pilot randomized trial in preterm infants and tested if sphingomyelin fortified formula influenced neurobehavioral development. They started with the Fagan test of infant intelligence, and you can see that the formula containing sphingomyelin resulted in a significantly higher test score on this infant intelligence test at 12 months follow-up. Then they did the behavior rating scale at 12 months, illustrated here, but the same was true at 18 months, where you can see that the sphingomyelin containing formula resulted in higher behavioral rating scale scores than the control formula. And in fact, every single subscale of the behavior rating scale was improved in the sphingomyelin group. So milk lipids from the milk fat globule membrane, such as cholesterol and sphingomyelin, may play a key role in cognition and white matter growth, and may be a major factor for the higher cognitive function of breastfed babies. Now, these lipids are just one category of a growing number of breast milk factors that might beneficially be added to infant formulas. And I want to just mention one of these lipids that's actually already in infant formulas, and that is long-chain polyunsaturated fatty acids. These are a key group of lipids in breast milk. Now, AA and DHA, these long-chain lipids, represent 20% of the lipids in the brain. They're present in breast milk, but they weren't initially put into infant formula. And the formula-fed baby needed to make these long-chain lipids for itself from essential fatty acid precursors. But the concern was that some added AA and DHA itself was needed in the diet, and that led to the hypothesis that adding LC-PUFA to formula would improve neurodevelopment. Now, observational data have been supportive of this idea. For instance, Dayoni showed that when you look at the formula LC-PUFA content of different formulas, that is highly related to myelin formation. But randomized trial evidence has been more problematic. In the past, there's been 2 systematic reviews of 29 trials in term and preterm infants that showed no effect on cognition, and further reviews doing the same thing in 2016 and 17 found the same answer. Some effect on visual development, but no effect on cognitive development. So a key problem here is that it's difficult to add LC-PUFA to formula as it exists in breast milk. We can only add complex oil sources, such as egg, fungi, algae, plants, and fish. Now, these oil sources provide other factors than just DHA and AA. And in fact, the LC-PUFAs themselves may be presented in an unphysiological form that would not occur in nature. Now, our trials show that LC-PUFA source may have a large effect on outcome. Here are 4 LC-PUFA studies done under the wing of the Medical Research Council, all randomized trials with good sample sizes, followed for 1.5 to 10 years so far. Each of these trials had a different oil source. The first 3 were in premature babies, the last one in full-term babies. And what I want you to notice is that apparently, according to the oil source, we can make neurodevelopment better, or we can have no effect, or we can make it substantially worse. This was a 6-point deficit in IQ at around about 6 years. Fortunately, we don't use egg lipids anymore. Also, you can see that we can make growth faster, slower, or have no effect. Now, if that variation is real, then these meta-analyses that have been done by the Cochrane collaboration techniques may have actually obscured the evidence, because if you put all the positive, negative, and neutral studies together, you may show nothing. Well, I want to just show you one rather successful study here. I'm not suggesting we should use fish and gamma-linolenic acid today, but you can see that with this intervention in preterm-born infants, there was an improvement in neurodevelopment and faster growth. Now, when we looked at verbal IQ at age 10 in the exclusively formula-fed group, you can see that the LC-PUFA limb had a 12-point higher verbal IQ than the control limb. And in girls at this 10-year follow-up, literacy was significantly better in the LC-PUFA group. So the conclusion here is that LC-PUFA may significantly benefit cognition, but only with certain formulations, which shows that it's important to do cognitive testing on babies who are fed on infant formulas. Now, these data indirectly imply that LC-PUFA in breast milk, the natural biological source of LC-PUFA, may well be highly beneficial for neurodevelopment. Now, in summary then, the overall evidence that breastfeeding affects cognitive development and structure and that individual nutrients are important for this is becoming stronger all the time. But I would want to emphasize that it's not just milk fats that affect the brain in breastfed babies. And given a longer lecture, I could have given you many examples of that. But I do want to just consider one very exciting emerging area, and that is stem cells. Now, 35 years ago, the function of live cells in breast milk was unknown. And I hypothesized that they might colonize the breastfed baby, but there was no way of demonstrating that. And at that time, we didn't realize that these cells were actually stem cells. Well, there are now ingenious ways of tracing the colonization of offspring with breast milk stem cells, at least in animals. There is a transgenic mouse model that expresses a protein so that all their cells fluoresce a red color. This is the so-called TD tomato protein. So what you do is you take a lactating rat with the TD tomato gene, and you get her to suckle pups without the gene. I'm sorry, these pups are pink. That's a bit confusing, but mouse pups or rat pups are pink. But these don't have the gene, and the mother does have the gene. And then you find that the offspring simply light up with TD tomato labeled breast milk stem cells throughout their brain and other organs. And these stem cells persist and they differentiate locally. Now, if that turned out to be true for humans, and we don't know that yet, then mother's genes could be expressed in the infant's brain and potentially influence neurodevelopment, and they could be expressed in other organs as well. I'm often asked by Muslim doctors as to whether there could be any basis for the relationship between breastfeeding and kinship that is described in Islamic teaching. And of course, this could be a very nice explanation for that in biological terms, because mother's genetic material is uniquely transferred to her own baby. Well, I've taken you on a rapid journey through what I believe to be a rather exciting field. Believe it or not, this is actually me. I took up racing motorbikes at the age of 60, and you can see I have my knee, my foot, the bike fairing, and the rim of the wheel on the ground in pouring rain. But I won't be able to do this for much longer because my wife tells me that if I die, she'll kill me. Well, I just want to consider very briefly some of the key nutritional messages to optimize neurodevelopmental outcomes that come from my talk. Let's start with the preterm infant. It's critical to meet the nutritional needs of these babies and promote their growth. For extremely low birth weight babies, growth up to 18 grams per kilo per day and protein around 4 grams per kilo per day would help to optimize cognitive development. Now, human milk in preterm infants is also a key factor for good neurodevelopmental outcome, as I've noted. And our latest data suggests that good growth and breast milk have additive effects on cognition in preterm infants. So in a statistical model that we are in the middle of developing, after adjusting for confounders, growth rate and mother's own milk intake are independently linearly related to IQ at 7 to 8 years. And then a worked example here, and I don't want you to write this down because this is very preliminary evidence. Growing at 18 rather than 10 grams per kilo per day was worth an extra 4 to 6 IQ points, and being fed 100% mother's milk versus no mother's milk was worth 6 to 9 IQ points. So conservatively, around 10 points of IQ could be clawed back by achieving good growth and making certain that mothers understand how important it is to produce their own breast milk. In the full-term infant, we now have a sophisticated understanding of undernutrition in the brain. We are beginning to understand the importance of critical windows and when nutrition can have adverse or beneficial effects, and we are learning a lot more about brain nutrients. With regard to the improved understanding of critical nutrients and biological factors in breast milk, we are really beginning to get at factors that may promote neurodevelopment. And perhaps one of the most exciting possibilities, although it's not a certainty yet, is the idea that mother's genes could be expressed in her infant's brain and influence neurodevelopmental processes. Now, current work is focused on the importance of nutrition in early critical periods. And I've talked about the fetus, the preterm infant, and the full-term infant. But new studies are now beginning to show that developmental plasticity persists throughout childhood and postnatal life. And dietary factors, for instance, sensory fatty acids, may in part play a role in neuronal renewal and synaptic modification at any age. So this raises a new area of translational research, and that is to further define the healthy diet, not just in infancy, but also through childhood and beyond for the developing brain. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Professor Alan. Yes, you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for this scientific and illustrative talk. Thank you very much. Now we can begin the question and answer. Yes. I have congratulations from many doctors in Egypt, in Iraq, Saudi Arabia, in Dubai, in Abu Dhabi, and in Lebanon, and here in Oman, here in London, also in Italy, also in Mexico City, also in Iran. There is doctors from Iran also. All of them, thank you for this excellent illustrative talk. Yes?
Thank you very much.
Let's begin our question. The first one. Thanks, Professor Alan, for this elegant lecture. Yes, many studies linked high protein intake in infancy with future obesity. How can we hold that small threads between giving or not to giving high protein containing formula for preterm?
Yeah, well, in preterm infants, there are factors that weigh things towards the brain. I mean, this is a one-off period where we need to get brain development right. And it will be quite wrong to feed premature babies on low-protein diets that don't promote growth and brain growth in order to satisfy a theoretical need for cardiovascular development. And we are beginning to demonstrate now that if there is substantial human milk in the diet, that mitigates the cardiovascular downside. But once babies get to full term, we do in fact greatly reduce protein intake. We think much more carefully about achieving growth rates that are more compatible with optimizing cardiovascular risk factors. Now, of course, you don't want a poor brain and you don't want adverse cardiovascular health, but you can treat cardiovascular risk factors. It's actually, once you have actually developed a suboptimally structured and functional brain, it is possible to claw some of that back because of developmental plasticity, but you're likely to be left with a deficit.
Yes. The second question, which formulas content enhancing brain IQ in infant?
Well, I think
what contain to enhancing brain IQ? This is from Dr. Bishoy.
Sorry, say this again.
Yes, formulas enhancing brain IQ in infant, which content?
Okay, well, I think that, I mean, it will be wrong for me to express any views as an independent.
No. He don't ask about name of formula. He asked about the composition of formula.
Yeah. Well, I think that most formula manufacturers now have focused on the importance of adding ingredients to formulas that might improve brain development. And there's still a lot of research on this, and different formulas actually have different components of a system that could potentially affect neurodevelopment. I think a lot of the data is not complete yet. I mean, for instance, it's still complicated even for long-chain polyunsaturated fatty acids, even though we've had these since the early 1990s. But I do like the idea that there is some attempt to put back, if you like, some of the ingredients that may have been lost. But it will be always impossible to mimic breastfeeding.
What about natural vitamin E, amino acid like leucine?
Well, I think that lutein and vitamin E are both ingredients that have a basis for favorably affecting cognitive development and vision. But there are a number of other ingredients that have also shown that, and I've discussed some of them in my presentation today. What is the optimal combination of those in a modern infant formula is not fully established. And also, as I point out, we're extremely unlikely in formula design to mimic the cognitive benefits of breast milk, because that contains biological factors that will be very hard to synthesize or achieve in a biological way in a formula-fed baby. So we have to remember that formulas have limitations here, but I like the idea that we may be able to achieve some improvements.
Yes, okay, thank you. This is a question from Professor Khalaf Gargri from Iraq, which is a famous professor in Iraq and Middle East region. He thank you very much, Professor Lucas, and thanks me, and thanks Egyptian Scientific Society of Pediatric and Neonatology and the Egyptian Academy of Pediatric. He have two questions. The first one, what is the rule of Kabar in brain development?
What is the
rule of Kabar? Yeah.
I'm not certain I understand the question. Yes. The rule of
Kabar, element Kabar. C-O-B-B-E-R. Hear me well?
Oh, copper.
Copper,
right.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, yeah. I'm sorry.
Copper,
yes. Well, I mean, copper in deficiency states has been shown to have adverse effects on a number of developmental processes. In preterm infants, there are a number of nutrients which are deficient at the time when we send babies home. Copper is one of them, although much greater attention is given to iron and zinc as far as elements are concerned. And of course, the preterm baby is sent home in really quite an undernourished state. I mean, the criteria for sending a baby home is not that we've finished with its nutrition, it's that they can breathe spontaneously and don't need the thermal environment of a neonatal unit. But they have deficiency in copper and phosphorus and protein and energy and so forth. And it is an ingredient of post-discharge feeding that should be considered. But actually, the best data are for of the minerals are for iron and zinc.
Yes.
At the current time.
Okay. The second question from Dr. Khalaf. There is evidence for the effect of a specific nutrient deficiency during early development on 5 key neurodevelopmental processes. 1, neuron proliferation. 2, axon and dendrite growth. 3, synapse formation and pruning and function. 4, myelination. 5, neuron apoptosis, programmed cell death. Which one is the most important in neurodevelopmental process? Which one?
I think that I mean, that's a very sophisticated question.
Yes, okay.
And it's actually very difficult to answer because, you know, you can take data from animal models where you can explore those types of things, particularly rodents, where there's been a lot of work on the detailed effects of nutrition on the brain. But the problem is that the timing of the critical brain growth spurt is very different in humans to most animals. And humans, it's really difficult to explore that phenomenon. So we're at a stage where what we're looking at is theoretical data from animals and actual measured data in terms of the structure of the brain that you can get with fairly crude techniques like MRI and cognitive tests. So I love the question, but I think it'll be a while before we unpick these very specific aspects of neurodevelopment in relation to nutrition. And it may well make us behave much more intelligently about nutrition to understand it, but I wouldn't say that it's a huge area of understanding in humans, at least at the present time.
Yes. Another question. I hope to answer my question. He said that I have a patient with familial compound hyperlipidemia. I debate what the level of cholesterol and the triglyceride I put the patient in. The baby is 1.5 months.
Yeah. So the question is what? Sorry,
yes, you understand. You hear me well?
Is the question,
yes.
What is the importance of cholesterol in
cholesterol and triglyceride? Yes.
Yes.
In a baby with 1.5 months.
Yes. Well, I mean, this is a very interesting question because obviously hypercholesterolemia is extremely damaging from a cardiovascular point of view at a later age. But at the beginning of the development, I mean, I'm not an expert on congenital hyperlipidemias, but just arguing theoretically, in the very early months, cholesterol is a brain nutrient. Although having said that, I mean, formula contains virtually no cholesterol, but there is an endogenous synthesis of it. So whether it's endogenously synthesized or exogenously supplied by breast milk, we would regard cholesterol as a promising nutrient for neurodevelopment. So at 1.5 months, you could say that it was a brain nutrient.
Yes.
But the worry obviously is the later cardiovascular effects. So I'm not certain that this has really been unpicked. I'm being asked some very, very sophisticated questions here. That's an excellent question.
Yes, okay.
But
another question. What's your opinion about controversy when to start weaning? Months, 6 months? When to start yogurt? What's your final recommendation?
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, this is a very emotive and political area, and one in which the World Health Organization has a major stake here. I think that for babies in high-risk situations in developing countries, it's important to avoid weaning foods that could result in an increased risk of infection and so forth. So one can understand why there has been good recommendations for going on to 6 months. And many healthy babies in Western countries do extremely well on exactly that policy. But nevertheless, there is quite a large body of literature that actually we recently, well, not very recently, but we did review in the British Medical Journal that poses different possible dates for different nutrients. So I think that most pediatricians who are interested in this field are extremely comfortable with 4 to 6 months as a
beginning after 16 week. You mean 16 week, Professor Alan? You mean 16 week? Or what? After 16 week?
Well, I'm saying that somewhere between 4 to 6 months, some of the data support. But on the other hand, there is, there is quite a groundswell of opinion that 6 months is a safe period and particularly valuable in developing countries. So I sort of remain on the boundaries of the debate here. I think that we will get more information on the optimal timing. I mean, if you look at Western countries, they're quite sort of divided as to whether they go to 6 months or 4 to 6 months. But in developing countries, 6 months are very safe, and I think it probably is pretty safe in
according to WHO recommendation.
I think you have to have a good reason for going against WHO recommendation, and it'll be a while before we have really good data. But there are some areas like energy and iron content and the development of new tastes which have to be got in a critical window. These are some of the counter arguments that you'll hear in the literature, but it's a very difficult political question.
Yes. What about yogurt? Yogurt.
Yogurt.
Yeah.
You mean as a I mean, obviously yogurt's a cow's milk product, so you would treat that in the same way from the point of view of 6 months of exclusive breastfeeding.
Okay. We will proceed to another question from Professor Nagi Shouha. He is one of the most eminent professor in Alexandria, Egypt. He say to you, thank you for your illustrative presentation. Would like to know your opinion for providing probiotic present in the market to the pregnant mother that will deliver vaginally and its impact on the infant. Second, safety and the efficacy of probiotic to premature and normal infant in the first 6 months of life.
Yeah, well, I mean, probiotics in infancy is more my area than giving probiotics to the mother, and there's much more work on the preterm infant. I mean, if you looked at the history of probiotics in preterm infants has been quite a complicated one. If you looked at the first run of studies, they were extremely convincing. It really did look as though probiotics would have an important protective role in such things as necrotizing enterocolitis and sepsis. But then when some of the larger studies came in, particularly the very large study of Kate Costello in England, it muddied the water. It was much less clear And then people started to look at individual individual probiotics in a much more intelligent way, and combinations of them. And obviously outcome, it depends on the probiotic and the combination. I suspect that in the next few years, we will have a much clearer picture of this. But looking at the data that we have, the same data is interpreted quite differently by different groups of neonatologists, say. I mean, for instance, in Europe, probiotics are very, very popular. In some other parts, there's still some skepticism.
Okay. Another question, what is the ideal duration of breastfeeding to achieve a good cognitive function?
To achieve?
What the ideal duration of breastfeeding to achieve a good cognitive function?
A good cognitive function.
Cognitive function.
Yeah. I mean, for some, I mean, the real problem here is that, that there is much more data on the early months of breastfeeding in terms of studies that have been done than there are much later on. So if you wanted to ask the question, would it be a good idea to go on breastfeeding for a year of age, which it may well be, the amount of data to support that is much smaller than it is in the first weeks or months of life. And some outcomes are decided on quite quickly. I mean, for instance, the impact of breastfeeding on cardiovascular risk in our studies, the window is up to 3 months, and the strongest part of that window is the early part of it. So a lot of programming there is actually determined relatively early for the routine metabolic syndrome. For cognitive development, it's less certain when the window ends. But I mean, 6 months of breastfeeding is good. I think a year of breastfeeding is not achievable by a lot of people, but it's certainly a goal and a recommendation. And I would have thought that the sort of lipids that we're looking at, for instance, that influence neurodevelopment, would be being supplied even out at a year of age, and you're still within the critical window for brain development. So I think, although the answer to that is not known, I think that a good period of breastfeeding for many months is probably going to turn out to be beneficial.
Is it recommended?
There are many other factors as well. I mean, obviously, sepsis is another one. I mean, there are many factors.
But your final recommendation, the duration to improve the cognitive function or to be good cognitive function, 6 months?
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's a guess simply because the later part of the first year is not as well researched as we have good data for the.
Is there a difference between a baby breast? Is there a difference between a baby on breastfeed for 2 years, baby on breastfeed only for 6 months in the effect on cognitive function?
Yeah, that's the sort of data you would need if you wanted to really fine tune that recommendation. But I'm looking at it from the other point of view, that breast milk is providing building blocks for brain development during what we know to be a critical window for neurodevelopment right through the first year of life. So even though we don't necessarily have the data, we could say that that having breast milk, and I'm not talking about exclusive breastfeeding, I'm talking about continuing to breastfeed for months may further add to cognitive development. But it's very difficult to be certain of that simply because of the relative lack of data beyond 6 months in most breastfeeding studies.
Yes. Another question from one of the famous pediatric clinical nutrition professor in Shams University, Professor May Nassar, which is our dear professor. She said, thanks, Professor Lucas. So, do you recommend for preterm mother's milk subbasis preterm formula in terms of cognition and the fortification of mom can ensure growth as well?
I mean,
so do you recommend for preterm mother's milk?
Yes, very much.
Preterm
so.
formula in terms of cognition and the fortification of mom can ensure growth as well?
Right. Okay. So as far as mother's milk is concerned, our long-term outcome studies show the best neurodevelopment in babies who have had their own mother's milk, somewhat better than using donor milk, which of course you don't use in Muslim countries so much, but it's used quite a lot in Western countries. But we have data to suggest that mother's own milk is particularly good. I mean, one of the features of mother's own milk is that it will have higher nutrient contents, notably protein content, simply because mothers of preterm infants have higher protein content in their milk. But nevertheless, if you've got an extremely low birth weight infant, you cannot meet optimal nutritional needs for growth with breast milk alone. You may decide that that is the best compromise in certain situations, and you can always increase the volume of mother's milk. But in the great majority of Western centers, mother's milk will be fortified with a fortifier. And then the question is whether you use a cow's milk derived fortifier, or, as is now becoming possible in Western countries, use a human milk derived fortifier. And that's obviously going to be an important area for discussion in Muslim countries because of the kinship issues. Although interestingly, these human milk-based fortifiers are based on so many donors that the chances of getting the equivalent of 5 breastfeeds from any one donor will be remote in the extreme. And also other things like the fact that live cells have been killed in the pasteurization process. So the possibility of stem cell transfer is eliminated as well. It's an issue that is currently being discussed in Muslim countries. And I think that's an interesting area because from a research perspective, the exclusive human milk diet has been associated with very good outcomes, where you're fortifying mother's milk with a fortifier made from human milk.
Yes, okay. Is it recommended a premature formula for every premature newborn?
Well, I think the thing is that in what's happened in Western countries is that the previous, and I mean, it's still current in some units, but the previous practice was to fortify mother's milk with a fortifier, usually a cow's milk derived fortifier. And then if you didn't have enough mother's milk, you used a preterm formula. In Western countries, the recommendation now is that if you don't have enough mother's milk, you should use donor breast milk, so from a donor milk bank. So what's happened in, say, the United States and Europe is that the preterm formula has been replaced with donor breast milk. So what you then have is, if you like, 100% human milk-based diet, which is mother's milk and donor milk. And then the choice is what type of fortifier you use. And most people would obviously use cow's milk derived fortifier. But the purpose of the new guideline is to increase the amount of human milk in the base diet. But obviously that's a difficult issue in Muslim countries because of the kinship idea. And so that's something that is very important for Arab doctors to discuss at a local or country level.
Another question from Professor Yasmin Gamal, which is a professor of pediatric and pediatric clinical nutrition at Shams University and one of the star in clinical nutrition in the Middle East area. He said that thanks, Professor Lucas. When do infants need omega supplementation?
What need?
Omega.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a breastfed infant, then you should have adequate omega-3 and in fact LC-PUFA content supplied from mother's milk. And I mean, there is this slight question which I've raised for formula-fed babies as to the source of the LC-PUFA in formula, but essentially our data, which I showed you today, shows that it is possible to have very good cognitive development with certain sources of LC-PUFA in formula. So infancy, where you're either going to be breast milk fed or formula fed with a formula that's supplemented with LC-PUFA, should be covered.
Yes. Does kids' intellectual disabilities related to mother's malnutrition? So there is question, does kids' intellectual disability related to mother's malnutrition?
Well, if you're talking about, I mean, the obvious link between maternal undernutrition and infant undernutrition is in the situation where you're being breastfed. I mean, the baby is actually quite a good parasite. So in situations where the mother is marginally nourished, the baby may actually do reasonably well. And there's tremendous variation amongst nutrients as to which nutrients are reduced in breast milk with undernutrition in the mother and which are not. For instance, total fat is changed, is not changed very much, but the detailed fatty acid composition, which may relate to her diet, could be radically changed by her level of nutrition. But it's certainly true that frankly malnourished mothers have milk which is not which is affected by the malnutrition.
Okay.
In volume terms and ultimately macronutrients.
Yes. We will take this last question and we will return again after Professor Ahmed Badr will finish in the open discussion. My last question from Dr. Muhammad Mahrous, what is the role of iron in myelination in infancy? Iron deficiency causes delay in auditory brainstem response and low IQ. Is it true?
Yeah. Yes, I'm sorry I didn't talk about iron because it's an important nutrient. And I mean, there's a very large literature, neuroscience literature now on the impact of iron on the developing brain. I mean, there are some cynical people who feel that that the data from randomized trials is not adequate to prove cause for an impact of iron on neurodevelopment. I'm not one of those people. I don't think that you can get everything from randomized trials. We all stopped smoking without any randomized trial of smoking or not. I think the evidence that iron is important for neurodevelopment is so profuse now. We should behave as pediatricians as if it is meaningful and could adversely affect the brain of deficients. And yes, I think that that iron is important for developmental processes in the brain, including myelinization, from the evidence that's been produced. The most important data, obviously, from a public health point of view, is the evidence that iron deficiency results in worse cognitive function. And that's the area where some cynics have said, well, there isn't enough randomized trial data. But I think it's really difficult to ignore the huge body of data that links impaired cognitive development. And of course, white matter development is extremely important in cognition. It is the wiring of the brain.
Yes. Thank you, Professor Lucas, for this highly scientific and illustrative lecture and for this discussion. We have a lot of question and answer. We will postpone it. Please stay with us after Professor Ahmed Badr finish your talk. Thank you, Professor Ahmed. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, and now this is the time for Professor Ahmed Badr. Professor Ahmed Badr معايا؟
ايوه.
مساء الخير على حضرتك. أخرناك معلش وسهرناك شوية. طبعا صديقي العزيز وأستاذي الدكتور أحمد بدر، أستاذ بروفيسور اوف بيدياتريك كايرو يونيفرسيتي. بروفيسور أحمد بدر هيكلمنا على الجروس ديفلوبمنت، بس قبل ما نتكلم طبعا على الجروس ديفلوبمنت احنا بننوه بس ان البوك ديت سبونسرد باي ابوت نيوتريشن دكتور أحمد. وطبعا لما اجي اتكلم عن ابوت نيوتريشن او اتكلم عن اي شركه في وقت الكوفيد اللي احنا فيه ده، ودي مشكله، فكل الشركات بتحاول تساعد قدر الامكان باللي تقدر عليه. فبنشوف معايا يا دكتور احمد؟
ايوه تمام.
فبنشوف مع حضراتكم شركات بتساعد وبتقدر تساعد عندنا في المستشفيات، وبتجيب مشتملات، ايفن الكحول، ايفن ديسانفكتنت موجوده. في شركات كتير بتساعد، وطبعا شركه ابوت نيوتريشن من الشركات المحترمه جدا 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 اللي قدرت تساعد الماركت وتوفر ايفن الحاجه الجديده بالنسبه لهم ان هي توفر البوتل او البوكس بتاع علبه اللبن السيميلاك ايفن 1 او سيميلاك 2 او سيميلاك 3، وتنزل بيها من 99 جنيه الى 75 جنيه. تهيألي ده حاجه كويسه، وان هي بتحاول تعوض الماركت وبتحاول تجو معانا وتحاول تسبورت الميديكال كوميونتي وتحاول تسبورت الفاميلي وتحاول تسبورت الدكاتره ايفن لما بيسكرايب لبن يحاول يقلل البرايس على الناس. فاحنا طبعا بنشكر شركه ابوت نيوتريشن على المجهود اللي بتعمله ده، على السعر اللي نزلته ده عشان توصل بيه انه يكون افيلابل في ايد كل دكتور. احمد الفلور مع حضرتك طبعا. عايزين نستمتع زي ما انت عودتنا. لو نفتكر الراديولوجي نهار كان يوم الجمعه اللي فاتت بتاعي يا دكتور احمد، مظبوط؟ ما شاء الله، يعني كان نسبه حضور طاغي، وحضرتك كنت متالق دائما زي كل مره. يعني طبعا هنستمتع بحضرتك وبمحاضره حضرتك. طبعا دكتور احمد هيكلمنا على الاسسمنت اوف جروث اند ديفلوبمنت براكتيكال ابروتش. فلور مع حضرتك دكتور احمد. شكرا
يا دكتور وائل، وشكرا للأكاديمية Egyptian Academy of Pediatrics, and I'd like also to thank Professor Lucas for the excellent presentation, highly scientific and updated, evidence-based. My topic today about assessment of growth and development, practical approach in your clinic, in your hospital, how to assess growth and development, and what is the importance of such assessment. We will try to cover the following aspects: overview on growth and development, how to assess, and assessment in general for growth and development. Definitions: there are many definitions that you can face, like stunting, wasting, underweight. And I will end my presentation by two cases. Please don't miss at the end of my presentation. What is the main difference between adults and children? Of course, children are not young adults, and the main difference between children and adults is growth and development. First, what is growth? It is increase in the number, in the size of the cells, just increase in the number and the size of the cells. While development is maturation of a function or a skill. Growth is a continuous process starting from the fetal life, infantile phase, followed by childhood and puberty, then adulthood. And this curve shows the maximum rate of growth is during the fetal and infantile phases. Then there is decline in the growth with increase again in the velocity during the period of adolescence. Many aspects of growth like weight, height, skull circumference, body mass index, and many other aspects of growth that you should interpret in the proper way. Serial measurements always needed to properly interpret such findings. And during the first year of life, during the first 4 months, there is increment by 750 grams per month, while in the second 4 months of life, there is increment by 500 grams per month, and the last 4 months in the first year by 250 grams per month. And this is the normal, and this is the average. Regarding the height at birth, the length is 50 centimeters, and it is doubled at the age of 4 years to become 1 meter, and tripled at the age of 12 years to be 150 centimeters. Measurements of growth is the most important component during nutritional assessment. It is an indicator of health and well-being. Measurement is the only way to recognize is this growth is normal or abnormal. سؤال هنا مهم. Does normal growth pattern guarantee overall health؟ يعني لو أنا لقيت الجروث normal ده معناه إنه there is proper health. The answer is no. Some diseases do not affect growth pattern, like mild bronchial asthma, for example, UTI, for example. Abnormal growth frequently indicates a clinical disorders on the other hand. وبالتالي, if there is affection of growth, please search for a cause. It may be cystic fibrosis, maybe congenital heart disease, chronic kidney disease. Many of the diseases affect the growth. But affection of the growth is late, consequence of nutritional insult. So if you wait for nutritional impairment, you will be very late. And early surveillance is necessary. Regarding the tips while measuring the weight, always use digital scale. حاجات المؤشرات pointers أو كده shouldn't be used on a firm surface. لازم يكون surface ما يبقاش فيه carpet مثلا أو حاجة زي كده. The baby should be naked, الأطفال الصغيرين, infants, and the child should wear minimal clothes. Remember, with diaper, shoes, jeans may weigh more than 0.5 kilograms, and this may affect totally the growth assessment. Assessment of the height using the stadiometer. The stadiometer, and be careful while positioning the child to get proper measurement. The child should look in the Frankfurt plane. What is the Frankfurt plane? It is an imaginary line passing from the ear hole to the lower border of the eye socket. It should be perpendicular to the vertical plane. This is imaginary line. The child should look in this plane. While measuring the length in children less than 2 years using infantometer, again, it is a fixed plate and the movable plate. This device is called the infantometer. Is there any difference in the value between height and length? First, the length should be measured for all children and infants below the age of 2 years. Children more than 2 years should be measured by measuring the height. The difference is very minimal, about 0.7 centimeters. Length is more than the height, maybe due to the effect of the gravity on the spine and so on. My baby is not gaining weight. It is a famous complaint in your practice, and the most important answer to explain to the mother is by the use of the growth curves. What are the growth curves? It is a graphic demonstration of the growth. There are the main three types of growth curves are the percentile curve, the z-score curves, and the velocity curve. The most commonly used is the percentile, and it is the easiest one to be used. And there are 7 major centiles, and these centiles are very important. If the child crosses up or down 2 major centiles, this is abnormal. The 7th are the 5th, the 10th, the 25th, the 50th percentile, the 75th percentile, 90th, and 95th percentile. The second one is the z-score. It is said it is more sensitive, more accurate, but in practice, I'm sure that all of us use the percentile. The z-score use the standard deviation and the deviation away from the mean, either above or below. The 50th percentile is equivalent to the 0 z-score. And if you go up to 3 standard deviation above the mean, and in the below -2, -1, -3, the main value of the z-score is it can demonstrate variation in the extreme range of like height and weight. The velocity is said to be the most accurate. Again, it can be used in some certain situation, like if you give like growth hormone, if there is chronic disease and you want to assess the effect of such a disease on the growth velocity. And if you can see here the maximum rate of growth during the infantile period and the growth velocity decline during the childhood and to increase again during puberty. And you can see here that females enter into puberty before than males, and the final adult height in males is taller than females. So these are the main 3 growth curves that you can use. Again, the percentile growth curves are the most commonly used. And the WHO, these are the WHO growth chart for males and females. And this, the centile, and this again, the z-score, here's the 0, +2, +3, -2, -3, and the standard deviation here on the graphs. And remember that 50th percentile correspond to z-score of 0, and almost the 3rd percentile to -2, and the 97th percentile +2. And again, percentile growth chart are the commonly used chart in your daily practice, as you can see. Here, the interaction between the z-scores and the centile, again, it is not important in your practice unless you are endocrinologist and you are interested in the growth velocity and to monitor some of the growth speed. Velocity growth curves, if there is affection, if the height velocity is less than 4 centimeters per year, it is abnormal and should be investigated and should be monitored. And if the weight velocity less than 1 kilogram per year, also it is abnormal and should be monitored. ولكن الأرقام دهيت مختلفة. الvelocity, growth velocity or height velocity may reach 6 to 12 centimeters per year during pubertal growth spurt. Also, the weight velocity may reach more than 4 kilograms, 10 kilograms in some pubertal stage. So, but on the lower or the minimum limit, لو كان velocity of the height أقل من 4 centimeters per year, it is abnormal. أقل من 1 kilogram regarding the height per year should be also monitored. هنا the 2 commonly growth curves available, the CDC and the WHO. The WHO are standards growth curves, while the CDC are reference. What is the difference between the standards growth curves and the reference growth curves? WHO قالت the optimal condition for which the children are provided and they assess the growth. While the CDC شافوا the typical situation of the children. CDC شافت population in the USA. WHO studied population in 6 countries، كان منهم من العربيك countries كانت عمان في مسقط. انما ال WHO كانت بتاخد بس الاطفال ال very healthy breastfed for dominantly for the first 4 months and still on breastfeeding at the age of 1 year, while CDC studied children, infants breastfed and formula fed. يمكن الحاجه المشكله في ال WHO ان هي studied اطفال بس لغايه 5 سنين، انما السي CDC لغايه 20 سنه، وبالتالي كان ال WHO سامبل كان الاطفال البريست فيد لينر، كانوا ارفع، كانوا لونجر، بعكس الاطفال السي CDC، وبالتالي ال WHO كانت بتشخص الاوبيزيتي اكتر وبتشخص المال نيوتريشن اقل، لانه الاحجام او الاوزان بتاعتنا اقل. بس الديفرنس ده هو كان مهم بس اساسا في اول 2 من العمر. طب انا هستخدم ال WHO ولا ال CDC the recommendation and according to the up to date and many of the references، هنستخدم في اول 2 من العمر ال standard growth curves according to the WHO، ومن عند 2 لغايه 20 سنه بنستخدم ال CDC growth curves تاني CDC reference growth curves while the WHO are standard growth curves. من الحاجات المهمه اللي الجروث كيرفز بتبينها لي ومحتاجه السيريال ميجرمنتس في الشورت ستيتشر، احنا حاطين the most common causes of short stature in children and adolescents. الصوره on the left side the growth and the height is always below the 3rd percentile. Even during puberty and adulthood it is less than the 3rd percentile. While on the right side, there is deceleration of growth to reach below the 3rd percentile with catch up to reach normal adult height. These are the 2 main causes of short stature in pediatrics. The first one is familial short stature, and the second one is constitutional short stature with delayed puberty. They have constitutional delayed puberty, and this is the reason why they achieve a normal adult height. With the delay in the puberty, they have more potential for height achievement. And this, of course, need serial measurements. If you take one measure, you cannot differentiate between the familial and the constitutional short stature. In your practice, one of the most important thing to do sometimes if there is uncertainty about the diagnosis to assess the bone age. Remember always that the bone age is highly and strongly correlated to the pubertal age and not to the chronological age. So any child with delayed puberty will have delayed bone age. So patients with constitutional short stature and delayed puberty will have a delayed bone age, and this is one of the main differentiating point between familial and constitutional short stature, besides the history, family history of affected or similar condition in the family. The second thing is some definitions you can face in your practice, like stunting, wasting, underweight. This is the normal on the left side. If there is decrease in the height in relation to the age, height to age ratio or centile, this means stunting. If there is affection of the weight more than affection of the height, so you use the weight to height centile, this is called wasting. And if there is affection of the weight in relation to the age with some affection of the height, it is underweight. Remember that underweight can be the result of both stunting and wasting, and it is very complex to interpret the underweight in children. But remember, and the bad thing is all these stunting, wasting, underweight are associated with increased morbidity and mortality. And remember the undernutrition infection circle and the vicious circle that should be cut in order to repair both the nutritional and the disease and the infection as well. This is the stunting map. And unfortunately in Egypt, the stunting rate is not low. It is more than 20% of the Egyptian children are in the category of the stunting, short stature, wasting 8%, underweight 6%, and this is according to the UNICEF WHO 2016. And here is another indication of the stunting. They should be more than the 132, but all these children are stunted. Again, stunting consequences may be associated with increased morbidity, as we said, increased mortality, death, and decrease in the mental development. There is affection of the mental development, poor school performance, decreased intellectual capacity, and decreased economic productivity. So to fight stunting is very, very, very important. And it is not only affecting this generation, it can affect other generation. And you should cut this circle. If there is a stunted child, he will grow to a malnourished young girl, malnourished mother, and the malnourished mother is associated, this condition associated with low birth weight and stunted child, and again the circle is continuous. And clues from the epidemiology. Dutch famine, المجاعات اللي حصلت في أوروبا في الحرب العالمية الثانية كان في maternal malnutrition during pregnancy. This lead to fetal adaptation and the programming, nutritional programming, with the long-term sequels leading to metabolic syndrome, obesity, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, many of these sequels due to the early programming and the malnutrition. So malnutrition in the pregnancy not only affecting the mother, but affect the baby and affect the, it is transgenerational, not only affecting one generation, but the 3 generation, الجد والأب والابن هيبقوا affected, بتكلم على mothers in general. And the programming by early nutrition, whether in the human studies and experimental approaches, proven the fetal and the infantile origin of many of the adulthood diseases, mainly the metabolic syndromes, diabetes, obesity, as we said. Can we predict the adult height in a child? We can predict using 3 simple mathematical equations. First, calculate the mean parental height by simple equation, paternal height plus maternal height divided by 2. Then calculate the mid, not the mean, the mid parental height by adding 7 centimeters in boys, by subtracting 7 centimeters in girls. Then calculate the target centile range by plus minus 12 centimeters in boys, plus minus 11 centimeters in girls. Here an example: if the father is 170 centimeters in height and the mother is 150, so for the boy, what is the expected adult height? The mean is 160, the mid you should add 7 centimeters, so it will be 167 plus minus 12. This is the mid parental height, and this is the final adult height. I will show you how to calculate now while the child is still in the childhood period. While the female, if they are talking about their coming or the present daughter, again the mean is the same, 160, and subtract 7, it will be 153 plus minus 11. If you calculate this will give you the final adult height. If you should plot here at the age of the maximum age for the growth chart, there is no growth chart beyond the age of 20 years. And you should trace this curve to the age, the actual age of your child now. If the height of your child is coinciding with the expected, he is normal. If it is low, it is below his potentiality. If it is above his potentiality. So if a child with chronic disease, هنلاقيه أقل من البوتنشال height for اللي احنا حسبناه بالpredicted adult height. يبقى الpredicted adult height بيحسب لي الرقم اللي هيوصل له في adulthood وببدا ارجع على الكيرف لغايه سن العيان دلوقتي، فبالتالي هقدر ان انا احسبه. والحاجه دي بتبقى very exciting for the families. You are able to determine the adult height, and you can also determine if the child is proceeding and on the his own curve, the normal curve, considering his genetic component. What is failure to thrive, or the recent term faltering growth? It is considered with the weight gain. Failure to gain weight in the proper way is called faltering growth. If severe, this may affect the height, may affect the head circumference, but this is in the very severe cases. In the late cases, it is not a diagnosis. There is no diagnosis faltering growth, and you should search for a cause. There is no general consensus about the definition, but in general, if you depend on a single reading, and this is not totally correct, if the weight less than many difference, less than the 2nd percentile, less than the 5th percentile, if the weight for height less than the 5th percentile, when this is the most important, if the weight drops down by more than 2 major centiles. For example, if the child is between the 75th and the 90th percentile, and now he is on the 25th percentile, there is failure to thrive. A question here, a child less than 2nd centile with normal growth rate, normal growth velocity, should we consider this child failing to thrive? The answer is no. And this is the value of serial measurements. So if the child is less than 2nd centile, you should investigate and you should monitor, but you shouldn't title this child as having failure to thrive except on serial measurements. احنا بنقول مش هنحطه الديفينيشن ده، ولكن investigate and to monitor this child. What is the cause of failure to thrive? A lot of causes of failure to thrive that can be generally classified into organic causes. Organic failure to thrive, any condition, any medical disease, renal, chest, cardiac, with severe affection of the nutritional status will affect and will lead to, or may lead to, failure to thrive. And non-organic failure to thrive constitute the main category, like 80% of cases, with no apparent organic cause. Here the organic causes, as we mentioned, many condition with organic failure to thrive. The inorganic, like inadequate availability of food, psychosocial deprivation, neglect, child abuse, will lead to an organic cause of failure to thrive. This is the first part of my presentation. The second, about the aspects of development. And in general, we have 4 main domains that you should follow your patients. First, the gross motor development. Second, fine motor with vision. The fine motor that you will use your hand, and it needs vision as well, together with the movements of the hand. The third one is the hearing, speech, and language together in one domain. And the last, social, emotional, and behavioral. And this is very important when you are facing a child during the in the primary care visits. You are checking your child in the routine follow-up. And here the gross motor. أهم حاجات اللي دايما تكون في بالي: at the age of 3 months, head support. He should be able to do a full head support. He can do some head support, and he can raise the head to 45 degree at the age of 2 months, but head support should be present at the age of 3 months, sitting between 5 and 7 months of age, first with support, then without support. He should crawl, but some infants do not crawl, and this is normal variant. Standing at the age of 10, walking on furniture with support at the age of 12, and walking alone at the age of 15 months. And this is very important. It is the median age to develop this skill, the gross motor development. Remember, to ascend stairs is much easier for the child than to descend, unlike the adult. A child can stand on one leg, and this is important at the age of 4 years. He can ride a tricycle at the age of 3 years. It is similar, and he can hop on one foot at the age of 5 years. This is the median age, but for assessment and for pickup of abnormality, you should always know the limit age for the main milestones. The limit age, it is the age by which the milestone should be achieved, And if there is no achievement of this milestone by this age, this child needs more assessment. And it is very important. Head support, we said it is at the age of 3 months. You can wait, but not more, not beyond the age of 4 months. لو في طفل ما بيعملش head support لغاية 4 شهور, he is abnormal and should be investigated. So the limit age for the head support is 4 months. For the setting, we can wait, provided all other parameters are normal till the age of 9 months. The average age is between 5 and 7 months, but the limit age is 9 months. And this is very, very, very important in assessment of the developmental milestone. Standing, we can wait till the age of 1 year, 12 months. And walking, and this is very famous, and all of you are aware about this age, 1.5 years, is the limit age of walking. If there is no walking till the age of 1.5 years, this is abnormal, but we can wait. Remember that the average age was 15 months, but the limit age is 1.5 years, and this, you should remember this very well. Regarding the second domain is the fine motor, including the vision as well. The child, the infant, should follow moving objects or light at the age of 1 month. 1 month, he can fix, he can concentrate, he can follow objects at the age of 1 month. This is very important, and can reach it for objects, can reach it at the age of 4 months. He can do palmar grasp, catching objects using the palm, not the fingers, the palm. This is at the age of 6 months. He can transfer object from hand to another at the age of 7 months. Pincer grasp, catching objects between the fingers, the thumb and any of the fingers at the age of 10 months. Waves bye-bye at the age of 12 months. Using the pen can be tested at the age of 1.5. Just scribbling at the age of 1.5 years. يشخبط مجرد شخبطة بالقلم ده عند 1.5 سنة. Can draw a line عند سن 2 سنين. يرسم دايرة circle at the age of 3. يرسم مثلث triangle at the age of 5 months. Remember, at the age of 3, he can draw a circle. At the age of 5, he can draw a triangle and can draw a square or cross at the age of 4 years. So these are simple procedures that you can test your child to assess his developmental milestones. Again, the limit age for fixation, the maximum is 3 months, and you shouldn't wait actually till the age of 3 months, and you should search for a cause. Remember, the normal neonate can follow light, can follow objects, can follow face from in the field of his vision. At the age of 4 months, the reaching for object, and we can, the limit age is 6 months, and 8 months for the transfer instead of the median age to transfer objects from hand to hand at the age of 7 months. Regarding the pincer grasp, which normally at the age of 10 months, we can wait by the limit age concept to the age of 12 months. And here is the scribbling, to draw line, circle, triangle, square. And the third domain is the hearing, speech, and language. And the important is the child crying in the neonatal period, of course, and vocalization at the age of 3 to 4 months. and babbling, but at the age of 6 months, he can say that the mom at the age of 7 to 10 months first, he does not know the nature, but at the age of 10 or 12 months, he knows that this is his mother, and at the age of 12 months, he can say 2 to 3 words other than mama, dada, and at the age of 1.5, he can say 10 words and 3 word sentences at the age of 2 years. عند سن 3 سنين, he can tell the name, the age, and the sex. And remember, at the age of 4 years, اللي هو الانترفيو بتاع الكي جي والحاجات دي, counting من 1 ل 10 from 1 to 10, and can recognize up to 8 colors. This is normal regarding the hearing, speech, and the language. Regarding the social, again, that the infant can follow face in the midline in the neonatal period, and this is very important. Recognition of the mother between 4 and 6 months, and it is very important. The stranger awareness and anxieties should start usually at the age of 6 months, and this is very important when you deal with this infant in your clinical examination, your practice. The age of 12 months, he can drink using a cup. Symbolic play, and this very important. تشرب دبدوب او لعبه او حاجه زي كده, دي عند تقريبا 1.5 سنة. To undress at the age of 2 years, and the dressing maybe at the age of 4 years. This is the social and the emotional and behavioral developmental milestones related to the cognition. What is cognition? It is attention, memory, thinking, learning, perception. كل الأشياء دي اسمها cognition. And the cognition is dependent on the brain development. And we listened to the excellent talk by Professor Lucas, and I will just mention 3 items. Is there any relation between the brain size and the cognition? And one slide about the brain development effect and factors affecting brain development. Here is very important that your brain triple the weight of the brain from the neonatal period of 400 grams to 130 grams at adulthood, and this is very important. And the nutritional aspects play a very important role in this brain development. It is only 25 of the adult size of the brain. How can it grow and to mature to the adult size? This is very important. The second is there any relation between the brain size and the intelligence? And which is the largest brain over Earth? It is the brain of whales, about 8 to 9 kilograms. The elephant brain weigh about 5 kilograms, and the dolphin is about 1.7 kilogram. Remember, the adult brain is only 1.3, 1.4 around. This is the average for the human brain. So there is no relation or correlation between the brain size and the intelligence. It is related to other things, the functioning neurons, and this is the famous one, Einstein, and he insisted that his brain to be available for research, and this is the brain of Einstein. And the strange things, that weigh only 1.23 kilograms, but the important thing is the region involved in the speech and language are smaller. There is no much speech, much unnecessary talks, and the region involved with the numerical and spatial processing are larger. So it is not only related to the size. And a very also important and troublemaking question: which brain is bigger, is larger, the male or the female? The answer is, of course, the male has bigger and heavier brain, but again, it is not only related to the size, it is related to the ratio between gray and white matter. Males, of course, have larger overall brain dimension. On the other hand, female have relative increase in the gray matter. Remember, the gray matter contains the bodies of the neurons, and this is the intelligence. Brain development depends on genetic factors. It is very important, genetic factors, but on environmental factors, environmental and genetic factors. And I will mention now which is more important, but both have effect on the brain development. It is both genetic and environmental to give your normal phenotype. And the impact on environment on your phenotype versus the impact of your genotype on your phenotype, which is more influential, the environment or the genetic factors. The unexpected, it is the environmental factor with 80%, roughly 80% in comparison with the genetic factors, which affects by only 20%. Factors affecting brain development, sensory and motor experience. And here I recommend, and it is advised, that you expose your child to many experiences, motor and sensory, in order to allow his brain to develop in the proper way. لازم every day يكون في خروج مثلا، لازم انه يبقى exposed to many social experiences and مواقف حياتية كتيرة. Parent child relationship also affect the brain development. Stresses, microbiota and diet are also important in the development of your brain. This is very, very, very important. The relation between the nature and the nurture, the nature with the genes and the nurture with the nutrition, both interact in programming of the brain development. والآية القرآنية والله أخرجكم من بطون أمهاتكم لا تعلمون شيئا وجعل لكم السمع والأبصار والأفئدة لعلكم تشكرون. This means that you are born with no knowledge, and you acquire the brain development and the knowledge from hearing, from vision, and this is that we said the sensory and the motor experience that you should be exposed to. So the effect of childhood diet on your adult health and disease, you should choose which direction you will go through. And one of the most important investment is breastfeeding to prevent mortality less than 5 years. Breastfeeding is the best nutrition for all infants regarding اي حاجه. ومن الحاجات الوحشه ان بنقول انه كتير من الامهات بيبقوا reluctant في اول ايام, but remember that the stomach size during the first day is like a cherry, and then it increased to the size of the egg at the age of 1 month. So it is not related to the amount or the volume of milk that you drink as a neonate, but remember to the composition of such milk. Any position of breastfeeding, including the side-lying position, it is not associated with increased otitis media. If the mother asked you, can I nurse my baby while I am lying on my side, it is okay to feed her baby, to nurse her baby. And this is Isis nursing Horus from the Egyptian, ancient Egyptian. And I will end by actually 2 cases. The first one is about 5-month-old female presenting with vomiting, cough since the age of 2 weeks, received many courses of antibiotics, many courses of asthma treatment, passing 6 to 7 stools per day with normal antenatal period. The birth weight is 2.8 kilograms. On examination, her current weight is 4.1. So this means she is below the 3rd percentile with mild lower limb edema. The chest is filled with scattered wheezes, crepitations, and bronchial breathing, areas of bronchial breathing. The albumin was decreased 2.1, and the cholesterol was also decreased 60 milligram per deciliter. Stool analysis shows fat globules 2+. 2+, and remember, fat globules is not normal. It always abnormal. Fat globule detected by the simple stool analysis is abnormal. What is your diagnosis? This failure to thrive is nutritional. What is the most appropriate next step that you should do? Unfortunately, there is no interaction, but here the most important, of course, it is not urine albumin, it is not renal edema. It is the most appropriate action is to do sweat chloride test. Cystic fibrosis are characterized by affection of two organs, main two organs, the chest with recurrent chest infection, and many are diagnosed with bronchial asthma, and this is not correct. And the other system is the intestinal GIT with steatorrhea and malabsorption, and this explains the poor nutritional status of this female. Sweat chloride of this patient should be with increased chloride more than 60 milli equivalent per liter. Here you can diagnose with cystic fibrosis. And the second case, again, please don't miss, 5-month-old female, product of consanguineous parents, failing to thrive, persistent vomiting, but no diarrhea, sibling death at the age of 4 months with pneumonia, respiratory distress, again, respiratory distress grade 2 with intercostal retraction, temperature slightly elevated, the weight is 4 kilograms. In spite of that, the birth weight is 3 kilograms. During these 5 months, only increment by 1 kilogram. This is very abnormal. Moderate dehydration and normal chest examination, completely normal in spite of the respiratory distress, and also the normal, the urine output was normal. Regarding the electrolytes, this case is abnormal, and it cannot be explained by the nutritional, just the nutritional insult, and there is some hidden etiology that you should reach by doing the routine investigation. There is hypokalemia, hyperchloremia, and metabolic acidosis, and the ultra, and there are actually strange, apparently contradictory findings, how this child is dehydrated, but the urine output is normal. This means one thing, that this child is polyuric, and the presence of vomiting. Remember, vomiting, if persistent, can lead to alkalosis and not acidosis. And if you find both acidosis and vomiting, this means that the vomiting is caused by acidosis. Acidosis is the cause of vomiting, as in many metabolic disorders, vomiting due to acidosis. And the presence of respiratory distress grade 2 with normal chest examination means that the chest is free, but the child is dyspneic and tachypneic with retraction. This lead to the concept, the important concept of there is non-pulmonary causes of respiratory distress, non-pulmonary causes of respiratory distress. And the condition here, the key is metabolic acidosis. Remember, in any child, it is a message, in any child with metabolic acidosis, please start with investigation by assessment and by calculation of the anion gap. If the anion gap is high, think metabolic. If the anion gap is normal, it is either one of two, either gastroenteritis, diarrheal disease, or RTA. And here the diagnosis of RTA is very simple, by just finding that there is metabolic acidosis with normal anion gap with hyperchloremic metabolic acidosis, and this condition is RTA. We mentioned here 2 cases presenting with failure to thrive, with vomiting, with sometimes with diarrhea in cystic fibrosis, with polyuria in RTA, and both are examples of organic cause of failure to thrive and not purely nutritional. And this is the ultrasound nephrocalcinosis. Also always nephrocalcinosis is abnormal, of course. The last two slides, your phenotype is dependent on genetic factors and environmental factors. And the environmental factors may be more important than the genetic factors. And you can change your phenotype by changing, not of course, not genotype, but you can change your environmental factors. And the main thing that you can change is your nutrition. And a clue from the environment, from the nature, is the female larva of pea, either to develop into queen or to develop into worker. And the queen with longer size, larger size, active ovaries, fertile, and the queen of the pecan live for 5 years or maybe more, but the worker for only 1 or 2 months, smaller with infertile, and they both have the identical clonal nature at the DNA level. And the main difference between the two is what they eat, the feeding, the nutrition they receive during their early life. And thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ahmed Badr, for this excellent presentation. وطبعا انت هتعمل لي مشكله كبيره جدا جدا يا دكتور احمد. طبعا احنا عندنا الويف الثالثه جروس اند ديفلوبمنت. انت معايا ولا مش معايا؟
انا سامع. ايه المشكله؟
جروس اند ديفلوبمنت الويف الثالثه، والمفروض الدكتوره ياسمين هتتكلم. فانا مش عارف بعد المحاضره بتاعتك دي الدكتوره ياسمين لو سمعتها هتعمل فينا ايه؟
دكتوره ياسمين صديقتنا بس يعني
هي عندها الويف الثالثه الجمعه الجايه، لا اللي بعدها هتبقى جروس اند ديفلوبمنت مع بروفيسور فلافيا اندريو. فاكيد لما تسمع المحاضره بتاعتك دي يعني هتعمل لنا مشكله.
حاجات كتير اكيد هتقول عليها حاجات اكتر من اللي احنا قلناها وافيد وانفع للناس ان شاء الله.
اكيد جدا، اكيد جدا. طبعا احنا سعيدين جدا 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 بوجود حضرتك معانا. طبعا الاسئله كتير قوي 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 قوي. اسال اول سؤال بيقول what is the difference في الميديكال تيرم between failure to thrive and faltering growth؟
معلش معلش دكتور وائل،
انت ما سمعتنيش كويس.
ما سمعتش صوت اكتر.
the difference in medical term، سامعني كده؟ between failure to thrive and faltering growth.
هما الاثنين ذا سيم، يعني هو ده الاسم الاحدث لده. بس failure to thrive لما اقول لواحد انت فاشل في القصه ديت بتبقى بايخه، يعني كلمه فاشل دي كلمه مش كويسه. For this it was changed from failure to thrive to faltering growth, but they are the same. الاثنين medically هم نفسهم the same. بس لما انا اقول للام عنده فشل في النمو غير لما اقول لها ان هو النمو بتاعه بيتراجع او حاجه بهذا الشكل.
بس احنا بنشوف ريسيرشز بتكتب failure to thrive ما زالت، وريسيرش بتكتب faltering growth. هل في scientific تيرم فيهم اقوى من الثاني؟ في تيرم فيهم بنقول عليه نون ساينتفك تيرم مثلا؟ وجهة نظر حضرتك؟
لا الاثنين موجودين، واكثر الريفرنسز دلوقتي بتتكلم على فولترنج جروث.
بتتكلم على فولترنج جروث. طيب السؤال الثاني بقى، ازاي اقدر احدد الكوزز بين النيوتريشنال اند النون نيوتريشنال ستيتشر؟ يعني اقول هنا الكوزز اوف شورت ستيتشر دي عشان الطفل ده مال نارجد ولا نون مارج، يعني اسباب ثانيه اللي هي النون نيوتريشنال كوزز اللي بنقول عليها.
هو
واحده كده الابروتش بابي.
تمام. هو كأي حاجه ابروتش في الدنيا، فيرست هيستوري including medical history, nutritional history, social history, dietary history. ده هيحل الموضوع بنسبه اكتر من 70%.
تمام.
second examination انا هدور، لا يعني لقيت ان الولد اللي عنده failure to thrive او faltering growth عليه murmur على الهارت، significant murmur عليه، مثلا عنده vomiting طول الوقت، عنده مثلا يعني epigastric mass، عنده diarrhea persistent diarrhea، يبقى انا بتكلم ان ده غالبا حاجه اورجانيك. لقيته عنده cyanosis، لقيته عنده respiratory distress، انا بتكلم على حاجه اورجانيك. انما لو كانت دايتري هيستوري مثلا، لا انا هو الولد ده ما بياكلش، بعرض عليه الاكل ما بياكلش، او الناس سوشيو ايكونوميك ليفل بتاعنا عنده متاثر بطريقه او اخرى. ريزيستنت تشايلد ابيوز، لقيت مثلا الستيجماتا بتاعت التشايلد ابيوز موجوده بشكل واضح في الام في الاسره بشكل او اخر. فالحاجات دي كلها تخليني اقول كده. يجي بعد كده دور الانفستيجيشن اللي هتبقى customized according to the clinical presentation بتاع، يعني لو هو عنده مثلا ميرمر على الهارت انا هفكر هعمل ايكو كارديوجرافي وتشيست اكس راي وهكذا، سويت كلورايد زي ما قلنا في الحاله بتاعتنا مثلا كده يعني. يبقى history examination investigation as usual. وفي الوقت دوت يعني اللي مكتوب وده مكتوب بقوه انه النون اورجانيك هم الاكتر، ده اللي مكتوب ان هم 80%. بس ده ممكن يكون الحقيقه برضو في الويسترن.
انت قصدك النورمال فاريانت يعني، او النون؟
بنتكلم على الفيلير تو ثرايف كده.
الفيلير تو ثرايف مش الشورت ستيشر. انا كنت داخل في حته الشورت ستيشر.
لا يعني ما هي نفس الفكره يعني،
النون باثولوجيكال يعني.
بالظبط.
تمام اوكي كده. طيب بروفيسور خلف جرجري برضو من العراق بيقول لحضرتك شكرا جزيلا بص احمد، الاخ المبدع بروفيسور احمد بدر على المحاضره الرائعه. سؤالي لحضرتك: critical and sensitive period of brain development in health and disease can create a windows of opportunity for neuromodulatory and intervention that are not commonly seen in adult brain. السؤال بقى: how can we use this window of opportunity to improve outcome, especially in traumatic and infectious brain injuries in children؟ دكتور خلف ما شاء الله يعني مركز قوي، اتفضل يا فندم.
دكتور خلف اشكر حضرتك على السؤال. very complicated very scientific. والبيريود او critical period اللي هي بتاعه الانجري هي نفسها بتاعه البلاستيستي. فهي two faces of one coin. it can damage the brain لانه البرين او الديفلوبينج برين بيعمل لسه synaptogenesis في الاول، و the process of wiring and selectivity بتحصل في الوقت ده، وفي نفس الوقت هي دي اللي بتعمل recovery and repair of the injured brain. بالظبط هي قد ايه ما نعرفش، بس هي اكيد في اول 2 years of life، لانه by it is a fact that the brain of the baby is less than 0.5 kilogram and it reaches the adult by almost 3 years and more. And during this period of development, if there is any brain injury, it will be injurious. And remember the etiology of CP, cerebral palsy. And at the same time, you can change your brain بالاكسبيرينس بالسنسوري والموتور ستيميوليشن اللي موجود عندنا. فالاثنين موجودين. عشان كده هدي مثال يمكن يكون يوضح الفكره اللي الدكتور خلف بيقصدها. يعني انا ممكن اتعلم 2 لانجوج مثلا ولا لا؟ الاجابه وانا صغير ممكن، وماي برين كان توليريت اند كان adapt to acquire 2 language من الاول خالص. ممكن ان انا استخدم واعزف بايديا الاثنين من الاول خالص في الحتت دي. فبالتالي لما بنبدا من الاول دي بتفيدنا. فبالتالي هقول الحاجتين تاني: انجري بيبقى سيريس، والديفلوبمنت لو انا استفدت من الاستيميوليشن هيبقى برضو مهم ومفيد للقصه دي.
اكسلنت بي. دكتوره زينب بتسال shifting percentiles in the first year of life from 50 percentile to 10 percentile for weight and height with healthy toddler with normal routine investigation and good nutritional history.
تمام. هو the normal that you should follow your own percentile and there can be some بيقولوا عليها normal rechanneling يعني انا ماشي في حاره ورحت في حته ثانيه. بس this normal rechanneling shouldn't cross 2 major centiles. What is said that if there is crossing of more than 2 major centiles, this should be investigated. I mean by investigation should be يعني اخد history واكزامينيشن، اعمل investigation في بعض الحاجات. فلو كان كل حاجه طبيعيه زي ما الدكتوره زينب بتقول كله طبيعي ومفيش حاجه ونيوتريشنال ودايتري هيستوري وكل الحاجات دي كويسه، فمش هيكون في مشكله. بس دايما هعيد تاني، لو عديت 2 سنتايل I should monitor and I should investigate.
تمام. سؤال تاني. failure to thrive best indicated is what? Decrease the caloric intake, muscle wasting, loss of subcutaneous fat, which of the above؟ السؤال
ده
اسال حضرتك تختار بقى.
هو failure to gain weight، بس انا مش
هو بيسأل هل هو معناها decrease the caloric intake؟
ايوه.
wasting of subcutaneous fat.
لا هو نقص caloric intake.
تمام. Great information regarding metabolic acidosis with vomiting. طبعا دكتور أسامة حنيجل بيسلم على حضرتك وبيشكر حضرتك جامد. دكاترة كتير وأساتذة كتير بيشكروا جريت ريكتشر برضو.
شكرا أساتذتي.
أحمد بدر طبعا أساتذة في
شكرا.
دكتور أحمد بدر. في سؤال عن الميد بارنتال هايت والتارجت سنتايل رينج. اتفضل حضرتك.
تمام.
يسأل عنهم يعني ايه الميد بارنتال.
سريعا احنا قلناها في المحاضره سريعا. المين بحسب الاب والام على 2، ده يطلع لي المين. الميد بزود 7 لو ولد، بقلل 7 لو بنت. والتارجت سنتايل هو رينج من الميد، فيكفي ان احنا نبقى عارفين الميد بارنتال. يعني لو انا 170 ومراتي 150 هيبقى ابني 167 وبنتي 153 رفلي كده.
دكتور حسين الصرفي بيسأل طبعا بيشكر حضرتك thanks a lot for excellent webinar. My question is the use of omega 3 in case of delayed speech.
هو المشكلة يعني اوميجا 3 بالاراكيدونيك والدي اتش اي are very important for the development of the brain, for the development of the optical system بصفة عامة، الريتنا والاوبتيك نيرف وكل الحاجات. بس for treatment of delayed speech او سي بي او الحاجات دهيت، هي دي يعني انا متاسف في اللي انا هقوله، بس دي اللي انا ما ينفعش ان انا اسيب الام مش هديها حاجه، فانا لازم اديها حاجه. هل هي بتعمل نتيجه؟ it is claimed ان ممكن تحسن حاجه. لو هو عنده deficiency في حاجه معينه يبقى هتعمل نتيجه. بس for the delayed speech many causes of delayed speech كتيره جدا. مش ممكن يكون delayed speech بسبب الاوميجا 3، اكيد مش هيكون الديليد speech بسبب الاوميجا 3. it may help ان انا بحسن النيرفس سيستم بتاعي والريتينال والاوبتيكال سيستم بتاعي كويس، زي ما انا باخد مثلا فيتامينز او حاجات بهذا الشكل. فده اللي احنا بنقدر ان احنا نعمله. في بعض دكاتره النيورولوجي بيسموا الموضوع ده ان احنا بندي كوكتيلز، وكلمه كوكتيلز مش حاجه عيب، انا مش بقلل من قيمه الحاجات دي. ولكن مثلا حد عنده ديلي جلوبال ديفلوبمنتال ديلي بيدوا له فيتامين بي بكل انواعها، وبي 12 وبي 6 وبي 1 وحاجات بهذا الشكل، والكارنيتين. ما الكارنيتين مهم فور ذا ميتوكوندريال فانكشن. وبالتالي انا بقول ان بعمل كل الحاجات عشان بين قوسين ما يبقاش لي اي عذر او حجه، انما كايفيدنس ما اعتقدش، وده اب تو ماي نوليدج في الحته ده.
طيب السؤال الاخير بقى قبل ما نخش على الدكتور لوكاس، لان الدكتور لوكاس قدامه 15 مينتس وهيغادرنا، فنلحقه في سؤالين في الاخر بعد اذن حضرتك. السؤال بقى when to use a formula fit. امتى نستخدم الريجولار فورمولا؟ السؤال امتى نستخدم الهاي كالوريك فورمولا ويز بالانسد هاي كالوريك فورمولا، وامتى نستخدم البري بيور فورمولا، وامتى نستخدم الجروس فورمولا افتر 1 يير، او الهاي كالوريك فورمولا مع البالانسد دايت.
يعني انا مش هجاوب على السؤال كله، لاسباب كتيره، بس انا هقول حاجه معينه. بريست فيدنج هو افضل حاجه.
ما هو السؤال مكتوب قصادي ان فورمولا فود بيبي.
لو انا هاخد بقى بعد كده
يعني السؤال بيقول can we give premature formula to a premature baby؟ يعني it is recommended.
طبعا لو ما فيش
ايوه، عشان كده هو بقى بيسأل السؤال ده. هو عايز يعمل بوزيشننج بالظبط.
تمام. مفيش بريست ميلك،
تمام،
مفيش بريست، يبقى لازم هياخد فورمولا بريماتشور فورمولا 100%. مفيش other alternatives in the absence of breast milk, even for the premature. Remember, breast milk is the best for all neonates, including the premature, but with supplementation, with fortification. بس لو انا ما عنديش الموضوع ده في زي ما لوكاس قال قصه الفورتيفايرز وكده، هي مش موجوده عندي. طب لو الام مش موجوده او there is no availability of breast milk, premature formula will be a must, including انا بتكلم على 3 حاجات اساسيه. انا بدي supplementation للبروتينز، هاي بروتين، محتاج كالسيوم، محتاج فوسفورس. ال3 حاجات دولت انا محتاجهم بقوه ومش هيقدروا يتوفروا بالريجولار فورمولا، وبالتالي البريماتشور فورمولا از ا ماست لو انا ما عنديش البريست ميلك. انا بقولها للمره الخامسه عشان انا شايف في الكومنت قصه طبعا احنا بريست ميلك از ذا بيست، دي ما فيهاش نقاش خالص يعني.
طبعا.
فتاني عشان بس اجاوبك يا دكتور وائل، بريماتشور فورمولا هتبقى هي الوحيده للطفل البريماتشور.
تمام، اوكي. Professor Lucas, you are with us, please. Professor Lucas. Yes, welcome again. Welcome again, Professor Lucas.
Hi.
Yes, it is now 11:30 in Egypt. I think in USA now is 7 hours before, yeah?
Correct.
Yes, okay. We can go for discussion with Dr. Ahmed. My question to you, Professor Lucas. In premature infant, when to shift from post-discharge formula and term formula? This is a question.
Okay. Right. I started doing research on post-discharge formula in the 1980s because there were no diets at all for premature babies when they went home, and I recognized that we had not done our job. We still had babies that were grossly undernourished at the time when they went home. And we did 2 trials on post-discharge formula. One was a pilot trial and then a much bigger one on over 200 subjects. And we concluded that although our data only went up to 9 months corrected age, babies who were put on post-discharge formulas should be fed on these up to a year in order to try and catch up the growth that they'd lost. And interestingly, whilst achieving rapid catch-up growth in term infants who are small for gestational age puts them at risk for cardiovascular disease, we did not find that was true for premature babies because they were already past the critical window at the time when we discharged them from hospital. So good growth was good for them at that point. So obviously you want babies to be fed on human milk when they go home. So we're talking about the situation where the mother has stopped providing breast milk, where you would use a post-discharge formula, or you might have a mixed situation where you're giving mother's milk and a post-discharge formula if she's not able to keep up the supply. And certainly use of post-discharge formulas improves catch-up in bone mineralization and in growth. And there's some fairly weak evidence that it may also improve neurodevelopment. So we would stop at a year and then go on to a normal term formula.
Professor Ahmed Badr, what is the difference between natural vitamin E and the synthetic vitamin E, and what is its impact on brain development?
تمام. هو الفاكت المهمة جدا اللي الكل لازم يعرفها، فيتامين E is antioxidant, is a main and a major antioxidant for all cells. Brain cells are susceptible to insult and many injuries. And for the development, one should give vitamin E for the mother during pregnancy and for the babies, especially if you are giving oxidants. And this is the reason why we postpone give iron therapy for babies till they are on total and complete enteral intake. So to summarize, vitamin E is antioxidant. In vitamin E deficiency, you may have myopathy, hemolytic anemia, neuropathy, and many of these defects. And for the in the old age, many are taking vitamin E as antioxidant. This is for vitamin E in general. Regarding the difference between the natural form and the synthetic form, the main difference is in the bioavailability. To deliver such vitamin to the cells, it is the bioavailability, it is much higher in the natural form of vitamin E than the synthetic form.
Yes. Do you have any comment, Professor Lucas, about this question?
No, I think that's an extremely good answer.
Yes, okay.
Professor Ahmed.
Yes, another question for Dr. Lucas. What is the synergistic effect between DHA and natural vitamin E when it comes to brain development? DHA and the natural vitamin E.
Yeah, well, I think that, this is obviously an issue that has interested formula manufacturers who may give vitamin E and DHA together in order to improve neurodevelopment and prevent oxidant damage. There is the possibility of oxidant damage with LC-PUFAs. In fact, it depends on how they're synthesized. But that seems a sensible, precaution. But LC-PUFA is likely to be the dominant factor for cognitive development, since we've been talking about that.
Yes, another question to the same line. What is the benefit of using premium formula versus basic formula? We have in developing country premium formula and we have a basic formula. What is the difference?
Well,
benefit in cognitive function.
Yeah, a basic formula would be a formula that meets nutrition. This would be my definition. I'm interested in Dr. Ahmed's view on this, but I would regard a basic formula as a formula that meets multi-nutrient and macronutrient needs for a baby, whereas a premium formula would be a formula which has got other ingredients in that are considered on the basis of research or theory to be useful for other functions like SN2, fatty acids, and all the things that I've been talking about today in terms of promoting brain development, LC-PUFA, lutein, those sorts of things. And the difference depends on how much weight you put on the data for these additional ingredients. I think that some of the ingredients that we add to formula, I don't know that the formula industry adds to formulas, have actually got quite plausible roles for improving outcome further than a basic formula. But in a number of instances, the data are complicated. For instance, just to give you an example, just to show you how complicated this field is, I was talking about our follow-up at 10 years in our LC-PUFA study, which showed a very large effect on cognitive development, verbal IQ, and also in the girls, an additional advantage in terms of literary scores. But in those same girls who'd received that particular form of LC-PUFA, they had greater skin fold thickness, they were heavier, and they had higher blood pressure. So you would be trading, if you like, cognitive factors against cardiovascular factors. So some of the ingredients we add still, they're sensible additions, but they need further work before we can be absolutely certain that there is a net benefit. So I would say that on balance, a premium formula is likely to have some advantages, but not as fully researched as we'd like.
Yes, for Dr. Lucas.
What do you think about that, Ahmed?
Yes. Ahmed, تفضل.
The interaction between DHA and the vitamin E, right?
Yes. No, I was talking about the difference between premium formulas and regular
premium versus basic formula.
Yeah.
In Egypt, we have many manufacturers with what is called the premium formula, including some add probiotics, prebiotics, DHA, AA in different situation and in different concentration, and I think we are, or all companies are trying to reach or mimic breast milk. They
yes.
will not succeed at all, but it is trial to be more natural and more mimicking the breast milk. This is my comment.
There is another question for Dr. Lucas. He congratulates you for this excellent presentation, Professor Lucas, and welcome in Egypt by virtual webinar. His question is, what are the drawbacks of using formula with fat blend containing palmolene oil?
Yeah, well, the reason why palmolene oil was put in was that the original idea when milk fat globules and cow's milk fat was removed was to try and mimic the pattern of fatty acids present in human milk. And palmitic acid is the commonest saturated fatty acid in breast milk. There's a huge amount of it, and something like 28% or something of the cup. And the problem was that people didn't realize at that time that the stereoisometric formation of palmitic acid was really important, that in human milk, 70% of the palmitic acid is in the middle or 2 position of the triglyceride molecule. And that makes it very well absorbed, because what happens is that lipase chops off the end fatty acids and leaves the middle one attached to the glycerol backbone as a monoglyceride, which is very well absorbed. On the other hand, in vegetable oils, the great majority of palmitic acid is in the 1 and 3 position. So what then happens is that the palmitic acid is cleaved off by lipase, and before it can be fully absorbed, it complexes with calcium to form calcium soaps. Now, we showed that they are the commonest cause of hard constipated stools in babies. And in premature babies, they are potentially life-threatening, in that I've seen a few cases now of babies who've actually obstructed their intestine from palmitic acid calcium soaps, as they're called. So the fact is that it might have been a sensible idea to try and mimic the palmitic acid content of breast milk, but in fact it wasn't a good idea, simply because the palmitic acid was in the wrong position in the triglyceride molecule. Okay. So the solution to that is twofold. Either you reduce the amount of palmitic acid, and the argument for doing that is that it's not been proven to be an essential fatty acid, although there is some work in preterm infants that suggests that just perhaps it could have a role, and that's why it's there in such large amounts. And the other alternative is to use synthetic triglycerides that are deliberately engineered so that the palmitic acid is in the breast milk position, in the 2 position, and then you can use normal amounts of palmitic acid in a product. But just having a large amount of palmitic acid in the formula is a downside, given that vegetable oils have the palmitic acid in the wrong position.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Dr. Ahmed, if a child has low percentile for growth, but normal growth velocity, I asked if this need investigation and further workup or not.
Any child below the centile should be monitored, should be investigated, and this investigation should be customized according to the condition. For example, if a child has familial short stature, all the time he will be below the 3rd percentile, and there is no investigation needed at all. There is no need to do karyotype, there is no need to do bone age, to intellectual IQ testing. This is the normal for him. But it should be considered why he is below the 3rd percentile. If there is nothing except this, this will be okay. And the famous example is the familial short stature.
اوكي هو السؤال ده اتكرر كتير قوي عموما يعني. This question is repeated.
I will repeat what I said in the presentation. If a child is less than the 2nd percentile, in UK the centiles the lowest is 2nd, and if it is below the 2nd centile with a normal growth velocity, this infant shouldn't be considered to have faltering growth.
Yes. Dr. Khalaf, yes, okay. Professor Lucas, Dr. Khalaf need you know your opinion about his question of how can we use window of opportunity to improve the outcome in traumatic and infectious brain injury in children. You hear me well? How can we use the window of opportunity to improve outcome in traumatic and infectious brain injuries in children?
Yeah, well, I mean, in as much as you can alter the course of brain injury by nutrition, it depends when it occurs. But brain injury in the 1st year of life, and of course, brain injury occurs often due to a variety of events in premature babies, including traumatic. You are in the window where you can actually improve outcomes. So the simple answer is that paying attention to good nutritional intake is extremely important. And I say that because it sounds like a simple answer, but quite often children with traumatic brain injuries are difficult to feed, and you may need to assist the feeding process. Yes. In order to make certain that food with a tube feeding and even occasionally more invasive than that. But you should try and make use of the window of opportunity to actually improve neurodevelopment through good nutrition. I think that often requires a more aggressive approach than one would think, simply because of the difficulty in feeding these babies. I mean, children with a variety of injuries, have cerebral palsy, for instance, are very difficult to feed. And you may need specialist feed advice on that. A dietitian who is good at that is often very valuable.
Yes, another question regarding brain plasticity.
Yes. Well,
which one can be more manipulated, functional or structural plasticity?
Yeah, well, they're both manipulable. I mean, the famous example, early example in the brain plasticity thing was the London taxi drivers. You know, that have to spend years learning the road maps of London, and MRI studies show that there's a part of their brain which are actually hypertrophy in adult life in relation to that learning exercise. So that would actually be a structural and a functional improvement, if you like, as a result of something that was way outside the traditional window. I mean, this is, for people like me who've been interested in programming, the concept that neuroplasticity could exist throughout the life course has been really quite stunning. I mean, it's quite different to the way that my generation was brought up to think about the critical windows of early nutrition. And it's an exciting field, and there are nutrients involved in neuroplasticity. I mean, nutrition is one of the environmental influences on the plasticity of the brain. There are nutrients that actually change the structure of the brain and can result in new neuron formation and new synaptic formations and so forth. So this is a really exciting subject. I mean, it's outside most pediatricians' age group, but I raised the point at the end of my lecture that it does raise the question now as to what we should regard as a healthy diet beyond infancy for the brain, because it is possible, because of neuroplasticity, that we could choose a pattern of nutrients that would further optimize brain development beyond the standard critical periods. And I mean, it's a very, very interesting field, neuroplasticity. I mean, not just from a nutritional point of view, there are many other influences, educational influences that can change long-term cognitive performance.
Okay. To Professor Ahmed Badr, significance of bone aging.
Bone age, in a simple way, define the maturation and development of the ossific centers, and it should go hand in hand with the chronological age, mental age, sexual age, social age. All these types should go parallel. But sometimes there is discrepancy between the chronological age and the mental age, for example. Sometimes you can face a individual who is 20 years with a mental age of 3, for example. Regarding here the question about the bone age is more correlated to the pubertal age. So any child with precocious puberty should have an advanced bone age, and any child with delayed puberty should have delayed bone age. So patients with constitutional delay in puberty and short stature, the bone age is delayed. And this gives a chance for more growth and more height achievement. So if you face a child who has short stature with a delayed bone age, you have a chance to increase his final adult height. And there is a chance if it is indicated to give growth hormone. But if the shortest stature child has advanced bone age or closed bone age or bone age of 16 in males, there is no indication to give growth hormone. There is no potential for more height achievement. This is the value of bone age. In some endocrinal condition like hypothyroidism, they are born with absent epiphyses around the femur, around the knee, the lower end of the femur, the upper end of the tibia. It is other value to determine the bone age. The final statement, bone age correlate well with the pubertal age.
Okay, another question, Professor Lucas, regarding babies with operation for perforated neck, ileostomy with high stool output, which is recommended for feeding. You understand me well?
Yes. I mean, there's a traditional answer to that, and there's a hypothesis that I would want to put forward for those managing these sort of babies. The traditional thing is that you make the baby nil by mouth for a week to 10 days, use antibiotics and parenterally feed the baby. But actually, when you look at all the data on how rapidly the gut atrophies if there's no food in it. I mean, for instance, if you give a baby, a premature baby, say, no enteral feeding for the first 3 days, you can expect to see atrophic changes in the gut based on biopsy studies, albeit in adults, and studies in animals. So you might say, well, why would you want a feeding regime to result in potential atrophy at a time when you're trying to heal an anastomosis, to improve the length of your gut and so forth? And one possibility that I think needs to be researched, it's not been researched yet, is to use small amounts of human milk much earlier than you would do in the normal feeding of babies after necrotizing enterocolitis, in order to stimulate trophic changes within the gut that might be valuable for healing and enlargement of the villus surface and so forth. So I think all I'm saying is that what we actually do is not necessarily optimal. And I can see ways of potentially improving that by new research.
Yes, okay. Another question from Professor Basma Abdelmuiz, which is a professor of pediatric and pediatric endocrinology, Menofia University. He asked about if there is a relationship between future psychiatric disorders and improper breastfeeding.
Yeah, is this a question to me?
Yes, for you.
You see, this is a really important question, actually. I mean, it's an entire new field of follow-up. But if you consider our long-term studies, what we've shown is that there are major cognitive effects of early nutrition, including breastfeeding. And also, we've shown major effects on the structure of the brain. And some of the structures that are affected in the brain, like the parietal lobes, are just the kind of structures that psychiatrists are finding in their MRI work that relate to psychiatric conditions. So putting two and two together, the big question that has not been addressed is that we've looked at in, say, high-risk babies and lower-risk babies breastfeeding, we've looked at a number of outcomes that could relate to the development of the brain, cognitive outcomes, motor outcomes, but we've rather omitted to look at psychiatric or behavioral outcomes that could be relevant to the mental health of future populations. So I actually think that there is a huge area for new research. I hope there's some neuroscientists, researchers out there listening to this to actually look at whether it can be demonstrated that the early types of nutritional management, including breastfeeding, could have an impact on future mental health issues or mental health related issues. A really exciting question, actually.
Yes. For Professor Lucas also, yeah? What about the mid-gut atresia? Does partially hydrolyzed formula works, and what other modalities of nutrition? What about, yes? What about mid-gut atresia? Does partially hydrolyzed formula works, and what other modalities of nutrition?
Well, I think I mean, atresias are an interesting group. I mean, some of the atresias are due to food not getting into the gut during fetal development. For instance, duodenal blockage, or having a esophageal atresia without the fistula, so there's no way that food can get into the fetal gut, can actually cause considerable atrophic changes. And there, what you'll be looking at is to reintroduce central feeding into a gut that's not had central feed in it, in order to try and stimulate the growth of intestinal villi and so forth. So it's actually quite important to look at the etiology of the of the problem here. But some of the problems I've been asked to look at are relating to the lack of food going into the gut in fetal life, because we forget that fetuses are enterally fed. You think of fetuses as being parenterally fed via the placenta, but something like a quarter to a third of the dietary protein intake of a fetus comes from swallowing amniotic fluid. So that's an important area. And yes, you do what you can, but the most important thing is that atrophy is helped by feeding, because feeding itself produces surges, particularly after birth, surges of gut hormones, as we've shown, some of which have really important trophic significance. So I'm not certain that there's a fixed rule for whether it's hydrolyzed or whatever. The important thing is that enteral feeding itself has a powerful impact on rejuvenation of the gut.
Okay. We still have 5 minutes to end, as I promised you, Dr. Lucas. Dr. Ahmed, this question is, in Egypt, many doctors use high caloric formula to make a rapid weight gain very early, maybe the age of 2 months. What's your comment on what? High caloric formula. High caloric, like 100 ml calorie in 100.
تمام. بس كلمة بي بي أنا مش فاهم بي بي مقصود بها إيه؟
أنت قريتها؟
لا أنا مش
Here in Egypt, many doctors use high caloric formula milk to make a rapid weight gain very early, maybe at the age of 2 months. What's your comment on that?
Yeah.
The use of high caloric formula is mainly to give high calories in a small volume.
Yes.
So patients with congenital heart failure, neonates with bronchopulmonary dysplasia, you need to give them high calories, but with less volume, with less fluid. Many patients with CKD, chronic kidney disease, with failure to thrive and oliguria, if you give them the ordinary or the regular formula, to give the normal caloric or the required caloric intake, you will overload them with fluid. So you need to give calorie-dense milk or calorie-dense formula. And these are the only indication. To summarize the indication, you give high calorie and less volume. But to give them, to give high calorie formula without a clear indication, you are giving more metabolic stress and renal solute load, which is not necessary. So if there is an indication to give the high calorie, failure to thrive, and you don't want to overload your patient, this is the indication. Otherwise, it is not indicated.
Yes, Dr. Lucas?
Yeah, just a comment on this. The other use or misuse of high calorie formula is for babies who are completely well, but just small for gestational age. Yes. And there is a lot of data now, and some of it our own data, showing that trying to drive a well SGA baby up the centile chart simply increases the risk of cardiovascular risk factors. I mean, we've demonstrated that if you try and catch up SGA babies, which people used to do because they thought it would be good for neurodevelopment, but it's actually not useful for neurodevelopment. But what it does do is put up their body fat mass and their blood pressure years later. So inducing accelerated growth in healthy SGA babies is not a good idea. Obviously, you have to distinguish that situation from an ill SGA baby who is malnourished. I mean, like a baby who's waiting for cardiac surgery or something like that and is falling off the bottom of the centile chart with poor brain growth. Yes, in that kind of baby, nutritional rescue is indicated, but it's meddlesome to try and force a well SGA baby up the centile chart. So I would just add that to the list of inappropriate uses of these products.
Okay. Yes. Now we are 3 hours exactly. 3 hours from the beginning. My last question to Professor Lucas. Sorry, Dr. Ahmed. Yeah. Professor Lucas, you have mentioned about the stem cell rule in breast milk. Is it early breastfeeding for a few months? And if weaned later, will that be helpful?
Well, I think I'm glad you've given me an opportunity to re-emphasize that we don't know if this occurs in humans. But we only know that it occurs in animals, in particular in the rodent model with the TD tomato gene, where you've actually got a way of tracing breast milk cells into the suckling infant. But it is an exciting concept because it's part of a bigger picture of genetic exchange between mother and infant and mother and fetus. I mean, you know that fetal cells widely colonize the mother. And now, as a kind of reciprocal idea, you have the possibility that the infant cells, the mother cells could colonize the infant and influence development. So questions like what period of breastfeeding is this relevant is too early. We just don't know whether this phenomenon occurs in humans at all. But I rather like the idea that this could be a biological basis for sort of kinship ideas.
Yes.
Because this would be a very specific relationship between a breastfeeding mother and her own baby from a genetic material point of view. But I think we have to wait until this is established.
Yes. Finally, we thank you about this highly illustrative and scientific webinar with Dr. Ahmed Badr, and we are very happy to be with us in Egypt in a virtual meeting. Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Ahmed, for this scientific meeting. Thank you, About Nutrition, for supporting the community also. And finally, in Arabic language, أنا بشكر جميع الأطباء في مصر وعلى مستوى العالم العربي معانا. بإذن الله انتظرونا بمشيئة الله يوم الاثنين القادم next Monday هيكون معانا last wave 4 of cardiology wave مع أساتذة كبار من عين شمس هيبقوا موجودين معانا، القصر العيني، طنطا، هيشرفونا وينورونا كلهم بمشيئة الله. يوم الأربع هيبقى عندنا الهيماتولوجي بيرلز، لآلئ الهيماتولوجي وأساتذة معانا، الأستاذة الدكتورة إلهام يسري، الأستاذة الدكتورة ليلى الشريف، الأستاذ الدكتور أحمد درويش، الأستاذة الدكتورة إيمان رجب هيبقوا موجودين معانا في الهيماتولوجي بيرلز. The next Friday we have a webinar in cow's milk allergy by Professor Van den Blas, and Professor Mustafa Al-Hudhud will be with us, and the moderator will be Professor Marwadi. Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Lucas, for your time. Thank you, Professor Ahmed, for your time. Thank you for the audience. We need to ask for something, Professor Lucas. The floor with you.
I just, did you ask me if I could say a few things? I just want to congratulate you for this meeting. I noticed that there are 130 participants still left at midnight, your time. That would never happen in England. This is a real achievement to keep so many people so interested.
Thank you very much. The webinar also is live on the Facebook, not Zoom, Facebook, and live on Zoom. We have many thousand to see you in the Middle East and Egypt till now, thousands of pediatricians live in the Facebook, and also from the beginning of Zoom, we are with other till now, till midnight in Egypt, yes? Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Ahmed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Bye. Thank you. Thank you.